Ever watch someone command a room with just their words? The audiobook, Words Are Power, How to Be Articulate, reveals exactly how you can develop this rare ability. You'll discover the 9 essential elements of articulate communication that separate influential speakers from everyone else. Master these principles, and you'll transform how others perceive you, respond to your ideas, and value your contributions. Without these skills, your brilliant thoughts remain trapped in your mind, your influence limited, and opportunities pass you by. With practical exercises and proven techniques, this guide will elevate your communication from merely functional to genuinely powerful. Before we go on, I invite you to download the free executive summary of this book, which contains the key ideas and takeaways of each chapter. Studies show that engaging with content in multiple formats significantly enhances learning and retention. Click the first link in the description to claim your free executive summary and maximize your learning potential. It's free for now, but it won't be forever, so make sure to grab it while you can. Chapter 1. Unlock Your Voice. She stood at the podium, her credentials impeccable, her knowledge vast, her slides meticulously prepared. Yet as she began to speak, something was amiss. Her words tumbled together, consonants disappeared, and her brilliant insights became lost in a fog of unclear speech. The audience strained to follow, their attention wavering despite their best intentions. By the end, her message, potentially transformative, had evaporated into the air, leaving only confusion and missed opportunity in its wake. This scene plays out daily across boardrooms, classrooms, and conference halls worldwide. Brilliant ideas die on muddled lips. Valuable insights fade into obscurity. Opportunities for connection, influence, and advancement slip away, not because the thoughts lack merit, but because the voice lacks clarity. Your voice is the primary instrument through which your thoughts enter the world. It is the bridge between your internal landscape and external reality. When that bridge is sturdy and well constructed, your ideas travel freely, making their full impact. When it's rickety and incomplete, even your most profound thoughts may never truly reach their destination. The power of articulate speech extends far beyond mere pronunciation or vocabulary. It forms the very foundation upon which all effective communication is built. Without clear articulation, even the most carefully chosen words and well-structured arguments lose their power. The most compelling stories fall flat. The most persuasive pitches fail to convince. Articulation, at its core, is about the physical clarity of speech sounds. It's the precision with which your lips, tongue, teeth, and palate work together to form distinct sounds that combine into recognizable words. This physical aspect of speech is often overlooked in favor of content and delivery style, yet it's the fundamental layer without which the others cannot function effectively. Consider the difference between saying, "I want to talk about our goals," with crisp, clear consonants and precise vowels, versus mumbling something that sounds closer to, "I want to talk about our goals." The content is identical, but the impact is worlds apart. The first commands attention and respect. The second invites dismissal or misinterpretation. This distinction is not merely aesthetic, it's functional. Clear articulation prevents misunderstandings and ambiguity. It ensures your message is received as intended, without the listener having to mentally fill in gaps or guess at missing sounds. When you articulate clearly, you eliminate a significant barrier between your thoughts and your audience's understanding. Moreover, articulation plays a crucial role in how you are perceived. Rightly or wrongly, humans make rapid judgments about others based on how they speak. Clear, precise speech is often associated with intelligence, competence, and trustworthiness. Mumbled, unclear speech may suggest carelessness, lack of confidence, or even lack of knowledge, regardless of the actual content of your words. Consider a job interview where 2 candidates possess identical qualifications. One speaks with precision and clarity, the other mumbles and swallows word endings. Who is more likely to make a positive impression? Who seems more prepared, more confident, more capable? The answer is self-evident. This perception extends to everyday interactions as well. The articulate speaker in a meeting is more likely to have their suggestions implemented. The articulate teacher's lessons are more likely to be remembered. The articulate salesperson is more likely to close the deal. The articulate leader is more likely to inspire action. The foundation of this power lies in a simple truth. Articulation is the cornerstone of being understood, and being understood is the primary goal of all communication. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. When your speech sounds are clear and distinct, your message becomes accessible to your listeners. They don't need to expend mental energy deciphering your words. Instead, they can focus fully on comprehending and engaging with your ideas. This ease of processing creates a smoother path for your message to travel from your mind to theirs. This accessibility directly enhances listener engagement. When people can easily understand your words, they're more likely to stay engaged with your message. Conversely, unclear speech forces listeners to work harder just to follow along, often leading to mental fatigue and disengagement. Even the most interested audience will struggle to maintain attention when deciphering your words requires constant effort. Beyond comprehension and engagement, clear articulation builds trust and credibility. Listeners instinctively associate clear speech with knowledge and competence. When you speak with precision, you signal that you've taken care with your thoughts and that you respect your audience enough to communicate clearly with them. This perception of competence creates a foundation of trust that enhances your overall credibility. This connection between articulation and perceived trustworthiness isn't merely anecdotal. It reflects a general understanding in communication research that vocal delivery significantly influences first impressions. The clarity of your speech contributes to how others perceive your confidence, intelligence, and reliability, often within seconds of hearing you speak. These impressions form rapidly and can be difficult to change once established. A strong first impression created through clear articulation opens doors. A poor one closes them before you've had a chance to fully present your case. This reality underscores the importance of developing articulate speech as a fundamental professional and personal skill. Perhaps surprisingly, focusing on clear articulation can also help overcome communication apprehension, the anxiety many people feel about speaking, especially in public or high-stakes situations. This anxiety, commonly known as stage fright or social communication apprehension, affects countless individuals across all walks of life. When you're focused primarily on your own nervousness, your attention is directed inward rather than outward toward your audience and message. This self-focus often creates a negative spiral. Anxiety leads to poor delivery, which increases anxiety, which further degrades delivery. Shifting your focus to the external goal of clarity can break this cycle. By concentrating on the physical aspects of articulation, the precise movements of your articulators, the clear formation of each sound, you redirect your attention outward. This practical focus gives your mind something concrete to work on rather than dwelling on anxiety. As you develop greater control over your articulation, you'll likely experience increased confidence in your speaking abilities. This confidence comes from knowing you can make yourself understood clearly, which is the fundamental purpose of speaking. When you trust in your ability to communicate effectively, the anxiety about speaking often diminishes naturally. This relationship between articulation and confidence creates a positive cycle. Better articulation leads to greater confidence, which further improves your delivery, which builds even more confidence. Over time, this cycle can transform your entire experience of communication from one of anxiety to one of empowerment. The journey to articulate speech that we're embarking on together is both practical and transformative. Throughout this book, you'll develop a comprehensive set of skills that will enhance every aspect of your communication. We'll explore not just the mechanics of clear speech, but also the strategic elements that make communication truly effective. You'll learn how to shape sounds precisely, how to command your voice through strategic use of volume, pitch, rate, and pauses. You'll discover how to structure your thoughts logically and engage your listeners from the first word to the last. You'll master the art of knowing your audience and tailoring your message to resonate with their needs and perspectives. We'll also delve into how to support your ideas convincingly, communicate with precision and brevity, and create genuine connections through your words. Each chapter builds upon the last, creating a complete toolkit for articulate communication. This approach is deliberately practical and step-by-step. Rather than offering vague advice or abstract theories, we'll focus on concrete techniques and exercises that you can implement immediately. Each concept will be explained clearly and accompanied by specific actions you can take to develop that skill. The benefits of this journey extend far beyond mere speaking ability. As you become more articulate, you'll likely notice improvements across multiple areas of your life. Relationships often deepen when communication becomes clearer and more effective. Misunderstandings decrease, and connections strengthen through the power of being truly understood. Professionally, articulate communication frequently correlates with advancement and influence. Those who can express themselves clearly and persuasively tend to rise within organizations. They're more likely to have their ideas implemented, their leadership recognized, and their value acknowledged. Clear communication opens doors to opportunities that might otherwise remain closed. Perhaps most significantly, developing articulate speech typically enhances self-confidence. There's a profound satisfaction in knowing you can express yourself effectively, that your thoughts and ideas can make their full impact on the world. This confidence often extends beyond communication situations, positively influencing your overall self-perception and approach to challenges. Now, let's begin putting these concepts into practice with some foundational exercises that will start you on the path to more articulate speech. The first step in improving articulation is becoming aware of your current patterns. Most of us have never truly heard ourselves speak as others hear us. Recording yourself provides that valuable outside perspective. Find a quiet space and record yourself speaking naturally for about 2 minutes. You might read a passage from a book, describe your day, or talk about a topic you're knowledgeable about. The content matters less than capturing your natural speaking style. When you listen back, focus specifically on clarity. Can you hear each word distinctly? Are there sounds that seem to disappear or blend together? Do you notice any patterns of unclear speech, such as dropping word endings or mumbling certain sounds? Make notes about what you observe without judgment. This is information gathering, not criticism. Pay particular attention to consonants, especially at the ends of words, as these are often the first casualties of unclear speech. Words like and, just, about, and going frequently lose their final consonants in casual speech, becoming on, just, abu, and goin. Also notice your vowel sounds. Are they clear and distinct, or do they tend to neutralize into the schwa sound, the sound in about? Distinct vowels contribute significantly to overall clarity and expressiveness. This self-assessment provides a baseline and helps you identify specific areas for improvement. You might be surprised by what you hear. Most people are unaware of their speech patterns until they listen to a recording. With this awareness established, our second exercise focuses on improving the dexterity of your articulators, the physical structures that shape speech sounds. Tongue twisters are perfect for this purpose, as they require precise and rapid movements of the lips, tongue, and jaw. Select 2 or 3 tongue twisters to practice daily, focusing on clear enunciation rather than speed. Here are a few classics to start with. She sells seashells by the seashore. Red leather, yellow leather. Unique New York. The 6th sick shakes, 6th sheep sick. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Begin slowly, pronouncing each sound with exaggerated precision. Gradually increase your speed while maintaining clarity. If you stumble or the sounds become unclear, slow down again and rebuild. This exercise trains your speech muscles to move more precisely and builds the physical coordination needed for clear articulation. Over time, these improved movement patterns will transfer to your everyday speech. Our third foundational exercise develops awareness and control of individual speech sounds. Take a simple sentence, for example, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, and pronounce each vowel and consonant sound slowly and deliberately. Break the sentence down word by word, and within each word, sound by sound. For instance, with quick, you would articulate the K sound, the W sound, the short I sound, and the final K sound, being conscious of how each is formed. As you do this, pay attention to how your articulators move to create each sound. Notice how your tongue touches different parts of your mouth for different consonants, how your lips shape various vowels, how your jaw opens and closes. This heightened awareness of the physical aspects of speech is crucial for improving articulation. Initially, exaggerate the movements to build muscle memory. This might feel awkward or unnatural, but this exaggeration helps establish clearer patterns that will eventually become second nature at a more natural level. These three exercises, self-assessment, tongue twisters, and sound-by-sound articulation, form the foundation of your practice. Commit to spending just a few minutes each day on them, and you'll begin to notice improvements in your clarity relatively quickly. Remember that articulation is a physical skill, similar in many ways to playing a musical instrument or mastering a sport. It requires consistent practice to develop the muscle memory and coordination necessary for clear speech. The good news is that these physical patterns, once established, become increasingly automatic over time. As you progress through this book, we'll build on these foundational skills, adding layers of sophistication to your communication toolkit. We'll move from the basic mechanics of clear speech to the strategic elements that make communication truly effective and impactful. The journey to articulate speech is one of the most valuable investments you can make in yourself. Clear communication is a universal skill that enhances every area of life, from intimate conversations to professional presentations, from casual interactions to high-stakes negotiations. In our next chapter, we'll delve deeper into the mechanics of articulation, exploring how to form speech sounds with precision and accuracy. We'll examine the specific roles of the lips, teeth, tongue, palate, and larynx in creating clear speech. You'll learn techniques for sharpening consonants, clarifying vowels, and connecting sounds smoothly for natural, flowing speech. You'll discover why distinct consonants carry much of the intelligibility of your speech and how to avoid common issues like dropping final consonants or substituting sounds. We'll also explore the clarity of vowels and how to achieve the optimal balance between clear separation of sounds and natural speech flow. This detailed understanding of speech mechanics will give you greater conscious control over your articulation, allowing you to speak with unprecedented clarity and precision. The physical foundation we establish will support all the communication skills you'll develop throughout this book. For now, begin with the 3 exercises we've discussed. Listen to yourself speak. Practice your tongue twisters. Explore the individual sounds that make up your words. These simple practices are the first steps toward unlocking the full power of your voice, and with it, the full impact of your ideas, your influence, and your presence in the world. The words you speak have power, but that power is fully realized only when those words are articulated with clarity and precision. Your journey to that clarity begins now with the conscious decision to unlock your voice and release its full potential. Chapter 2. Speak with Precision. The room fell silent as the executive stepped to the podium. Her reputation preceded her: brilliant strategist, visionary leader, transformative thinker. Yet within moments of her opening remarks, something subtle but significant began to unfold. The audience leaned forward, their attention captured not just by her ideas, but by the remarkable clarity of her delivery. Each word emerged with crystalline precision. Every syllable found its perfect form. The consonants stood crisp and defined. The vowels resonated with perfect pitch. Without apparent effort, she commanded the space through nothing more than the exquisite precision of her speech. What you just witnessed was not merely good public speaking. It was the manifestation of a fundamental truth about human communication: precision creates power. When we speak with precision, we don't just convey information, we command attention, build credibility, and create impact that extends far beyond our words alone. But what exactly does it mean to speak with precision? And more importantly, how can you develop this ability for yourself? The answer lies deeper than most people realize. It's found not just in what we say, but in how we physically create the sounds that form our words. This dimension of communication often goes unnoticed, yet it forms the very foundation upon which all effective speech is built. When we speak of precision in speech, we're actually talking about two distinct but related concepts: articulation and pronunciation. Though often used interchangeably, these terms represent different aspects of clear speech, each with its own set of principles and techniques. Articulation refers to the physical act of shaping sounds. It's the precise movement of your speech organs, lips, teeth, tongue, palate, and larynx, to form the individual sounds that combine into words. Think of articulation as the mechanical process, the physical craftsmanship of speech. Pronunciation, on the other hand, refers to conforming to accepted standards of sound and accent when forming words. It's about saying words correctly according to the conventions of a particular language or dialect. While articulation focuses on the clarity of individual sounds, pronunciation concerns the pattern of sounds that make up specific words. Both elements are crucial for effective communication. You might articulate each sound with perfect clarity, but if you pronounce words incorrectly, placing stress on the wrong syllable, or using sounds that don't match the accepted pronunciation, your message may still be misunderstood or your credibility diminished. Conversely, you might know the correct pronunciation of every word in your vocabulary, but if your articulation is poor, if you mumble or slur your sounds, your knowledge won't translate into clear communication. Together, precise articulation and correct pronunciation form the foundation of clear speech. They ensure your message is not just heard, but understood exactly as you intend it. They eliminate barriers between your thoughts and your listener's comprehension, and perhaps most importantly, they significantly influence how you are perceived as a communicator and as a person. To master these elements, we must first understand the tools at our disposal, the physical structures that create speech. These articulators are the instruments you use to shape sounds, and developing awareness of how they function is the first step toward greater precision. Let's start with the lips. These flexible structures are involved in forming many consonant sounds, including p as in pat, b as in bat, m as in mat, and w as in wat. They also help shape vowels, rounding for sounds like o as in go and u as in you, and spreading for sounds like e as in me. The precise positioning and movement of your lips significantly affects the clarity of these sounds. Your teeth play a crucial role in creating certain consonants, particularly fricatives, sounds produced by forcing air through a narrow channel. These include fif as in fine, v as in vine, and the tut sounds in thin and then. When your teeth are positioned correctly in relation to your lips or tongue, these sounds emerge with clarity. When the positioning is off, these sounds become distorted. The tongue is perhaps the most versatile and important articulator. This remarkably agile muscle creates a vast array of sounds by changing its shape and position within the mouth. It's involved in most consonants, including t, n, l, k, s, and jish, as well as all vowel sounds. The tongue can touch various parts of the mouth: the teeth, the alveolar ridge, the bump behind your upper teeth, the hard palate, and the soft palate to create different sounds. Its precise positioning is critical for clear articulation. The palate, divided into the hard palate, the bony front section of the roof of your mouth, and the soft palate, the fleshy back section, serves as an interaction point for the tongue. Sounds like k, g, ng, and y involve the tongue making contact with or moving close to different parts of the palate. The soft palate also rises to close off the nasal passage for non-nasal sounds and lowers to allow air through the nose for nasal sounds like m, in, and ng. Finally, the larynx, or voice box, contains your vocal cords and is the source of vibration for voice sounds. When your vocal cords vibrate, they produce voice sounds like vowels and consonants, such as b, d, v, z, and z. When they don't vibrate, they produce unvoiced sounds like p, t, k, f, s, and shish. The coordination between your larynx and other articulators creates the full range of speech sounds. Understanding these tools gives you greater conscious control over your speech production. By knowing which articulators are involved in which sounds, you can focus your attention on the precise movements needed for clear speech. This awareness is the foundation for improving both articulation and pronunciation. Now that we understand the tools, let's explore how to use them most effectively, beginning with the articulation of consonants. Consonants carry much of the intelligibility of speech. They're the framework that makes words recognizable. When consonants are unclear, understanding becomes significantly more difficult, even if vowels are pronounced perfectly. One of the most common articulation issues is dropping final consonants. Words like and become an, just becomes jus, going becomes goin. This pattern, while common in casual speech, can significantly reduce clarity, especially when speaking to larger groups or in professional contexts. The solution is conscious attention to completing each sound, particularly at the ends of words. Practice exaggerating these final consonants initially, giving them slightly more emphasis than might seem natural, until the complete pronunciation becomes habitual. Another common issue is slurring or substituting consonants. The classic example is saying dat instead of that, or with instead of with. These substitutions often happen unconsciously, especially when speaking quickly. Addressing this requires first becoming aware of your specific patterns. Recording yourself can be illuminating, and then practicing the correct formations deliberately, focusing on the precise placement of your articulators. To sharpen consonant sounds generally, try these techniques. First, practice exploding plosive consonants like b, t, d, k, and g. These sounds involve stopping the airflow completely and then releasing it suddenly. Exaggerate this stop-release pattern to strengthen these sounds. Second, extend fricatives like v, s, z, sh, and th. These continuous consonants can be held out longer than plosives. Practice sustaining them for a few seconds to develop greater control. Third, practice minimal pairs, words that differ by only one consonant sound, like pat and bat or thin and fin. Alternating between these words highlights the precise articulator movements needed for each distinct sound. While consonants provide the framework for intelligibility, vowels add color, emotion, and musicality to speech. Clear vowels enhance not just understanding, but also the aesthetic quality of your speech. Mastering vowel sounds requires understanding the distinction between pure vowels and diphthongs, as well as addressing common issues that affect vowel clarity. Pure vowels maintain the same sound throughout their duration. In English, these include sounds like the E in see, the oo in blue, the ah in father, and several others. Diphthongs, by contrast, involve a smooth transition from one vowel sound to another within a single syllable. Examples include the I in my, the oo in go, and the oi in boy. A common issue affecting vowel clarity is neutralization, the tendency to reduce distinct vowel sounds to the neutral schwa sound, as in the second syllable of about. While this is natural in unstressed syllables, excessive neutralization can make speech sound mumbled or unclear. Practice maintaining the distinct quality of vowels, especially in stressed syllables, by exaggerating the characteristic mouth position for each vowel sound. Regional variations in vowel pronunciation can also affect clarity, particularly when communicating with diverse audiences. While regional accents add character and authenticity to speech, being able to modify toward more standard pronunciations when needed can enhance clarity in certain contexts. This doesn't mean eliminating your accent entirely, but rather developing the flexibility to adjust it when clarity is paramount. To achieve clearer vowel sounds, try opening your mouth more fully when speaking. Many people speak with their mouths barely open, which constrains vowel resonance. Practice dropping your jaw slightly more than feels natural to create more space for vowel sounds to resonate. Also, focus on the specific mouth positions for each vowel. Front vowels like E as in see and E as in say involve spreading the lips and positioning the tongue forward in the mouth. Back vowels like U as in blue and O as in go involve rounding the lips and positioning the tongue toward the back of the mouth. Practicing these positions deliberately will help create more distinct vowel sounds. While clear articulation of individual sounds is essential, natural speech involves connecting these sounds smoothly. Finding the right balance between crisp, distinct sounds and natural flow is key to speech that is both clear and pleasant to listen to. Choppy speech, where each word or syllable sounds disconnected from the others, can be as problematic as mumbled speech. It creates an unnatural rhythm that can distract listeners from your message. The goal is smooth transitions between sounds while maintaining their distinct qualities. In natural speech, sounds often link together across word boundaries. For instance, when saying an apple, the "in" sound at the end of "an" links to the beginning of apple. Similarly, sounds may assimilate or slightly change based on adjacent sounds. For example, handbag often becomes hambag in natural speech, with the "in" assimilating to an "m" before the "b" sound. These natural processes help create flowing speech, but they should not compromise clarity. The key is to allow these connections while still giving each sound its due. Practice speaking at a slightly slower pace initially, focusing on the complete formation of each sound while allowing them to flow smoothly into one another. As this becomes more natural, you can gradually increase your speed while maintaining clarity. Beyond the physical formation of sounds, speaking with precision also involves saying words correctly according to accepted standards, what we call pronunciation. While articulation concerns how clearly you form sounds, pronunciation addresses whether you're using the right sounds in the right order with the right emphasis for each word. Correct pronunciation matters for several reasons. First, it avoids confusion and distraction. When you mispronounce a word, listeners may focus on the error rather than your message, or they may misunderstand your meaning entirely. Second, accurate pronunciation enhances your credibility and demonstrates attention to detail. Listeners often, consciously or unconsciously, associate correct pronunciation with knowledge and preparation. Finally, using accepted pronunciations shows respect for the language and your audience, indicating that you've taken care with your communication. Several common pronunciation pitfalls can undermine otherwise clear speech. One of the most frequent is misplaced stress on syllables. English words typically have one syllable that receives primary stress. It's slightly louder, longer, and higher in pitch than the others. Placing this stress incorrectly can make even familiar words sound foreign or confusing. For example, the word record changes meaning based on syllable stress. When the stress is on the first syllable, record, it's a noun referring to documentation or achievement. When the stress is on the second syllable, record, it's a verb meaning to document or register. Similar patterns exist for many words, including present, object, contest, and permit. Another common issue involves silent letters, those written but not pronounced in certain words. English has many such letters, reflecting its complex etymological history. Examples include the K in no, the B in doubt, the T in often, though this is changing in some dialects, and the P in psychology. Pronouncing these silent letters marks you as unfamiliar with standard pronunciation. For non-native speakers, sounds that don't exist in one's native language pose particular challenges. For instance, many languages don't have the th sounds found in English words like thin and then, leading speakers to substitute similar sounds like t, d, s, or z's. Similarly, the distinction between l and is challenging for speakers of some Asian languages, while English vowel distinctions can be difficult for speakers of languages with fewer vowel sounds. Even native speakers regularly mispronounce certain words. Some commonly mispronounced words include espresso, often said as espresso, nuclear, often said as nuclear, supposedly, often said as supposedly, specific, often said as pacific, asterisk, often said as asterisk, prescription, often said as prescription, pronunciation, ironically, often said as pronunciation, Improving pronunciation requires conscious effort and specific strategies. One of the most effective approaches is active listening to clear speakers. Pay attention to how articulate speakers pronounce words, particularly those in your professional field or words you commonly use. News broadcasters, audiobook narrators, and professional speakers can serve as excellent models. Dictionaries and online resources are invaluable for checking pronunciations. Most dictionaries include pronunciation guides, and many online dictionaries offer audio pronunciations. Make it a habit to look up words you're unsure about, especially before using them in important communications. For challenging words, breaking them down into syllables can help. Pronounce each syllable slowly and then gradually combine them, maintaining the correct stress pattern. This methodical approach makes complex words more manageable. For those interested in a more systematic approach, the International Phonetic Alphabet, IPA, provides a standardized way to represent speech sounds. While learning the entire IPA isn't necessary for most speakers, understanding basic phonetic symbols can help you interpret pronunciation guides in dictionaries and other resources. Now that we've explored the principles of articulation and pronunciation, let's put this knowledge into practice with exercises designed to develop your precision in speech. Our first exercise focuses on increasing the flexibility and control of your articulators through what we might call a mouth gym routine. Just as athletes warm up their muscles before performance, speakers benefit from warming up their articulators. Start with jaw exercises. Let your mouth hang open, relaxing your jaw completely. Then close it gently. Repeat this several times, focusing on the sensation of relaxation. Next, move your jaw side to side and forward and back, again keeping the movements gentle and controlled. For lip exercises, practice alternating between spreading your lips in a wide smile and rounding them into an O shape. Then try buzzing your lips, like making a brr sound, which helps increase their flexibility and control. Tongue exercises are particularly important, as the tongue is involved in most speech sounds. Practice touching the tip of your tongue to different points in your mouth, behind your upper teeth, the roof of your mouth, the back of your lower teeth. Then try curling your tongue tip up toward your nose and down toward your chin. Finally, practice moving your tongue rapidly from side to side. As you perform these exercises, focus on deliberate and slightly exaggerated movements. The goal is to increase your conscious control over these structures, which will translate into more precise articulation in your speech. Our second exercise develops phonetic awareness by isolating and practicing individual sounds within words. Choose a paragraph from a book or article and read it aloud, focusing on one specific sound at a time. For instance, you might first focus on all the s sounds in the paragraph, making sure each one is crisp and clear. Then go through again, focusing on all the th sounds, ensuring your tongue position is correct for each one. Continue this process with different sounds, particularly those you find challenging. Using a mirror during this exercise can be extremely helpful. It allows you to observe the movements of your lips, jaw, and the visible parts of your tongue, providing visual feedback on your articulation. Pay attention to how your mouth looks when you produce clear sounds versus when they're unclear, and work to consistently achieve the positions that produce clarity. Our final exercise builds the habit of verifying pronunciation, a practice that will serve you throughout your life as a communicator. Start keeping a running list of words you're unsure how to pronounce. These might be words you encounter in reading but rarely hear spoken, technical terms in your field, proper names, or words that simply give you pause. Regularly look up these words using a reliable dictionary or online resource that provides audio pronunciations. When you find the correct pronunciation, practice saying the word aloud several times to reinforce the proper pattern. Pay particular attention to which syllable receives the primary stress and whether there are any silent letters or unexpected sound patterns. Make this a consistent habit, and you'll gradually build a more extensive vocabulary of words you can pronounce with confidence. This practice also develops a valuable mindset, the understanding that checking pronunciation is not a sign of ignorance, but rather of commitment to precise communication. As you incorporate these exercises into your routine, remember that developing precision in speech is a gradual process. The goal is not perfection, but improvement, each day speaking with slightly greater clarity and accuracy than before. The benefits of this practice extend far beyond mere correctness. When you speak with precision, you remove barriers between your thoughts and your listener's understanding. You enhance your credibility and authority. You demonstrate respect for your audience and your message. And perhaps most importantly, you ensure that your ideas, the valuable content you have to share, receive the clear expression they deserve. In our next chapter, we'll move beyond the individual sounds of speech to explore how you can command your sound through strategic use of volume, pitch, rate, and pauses. You'll discover how these elements of vocal delivery can transform even perfectly articulated words into truly compelling communication. The difference between being merely understood and being truly captivating often lies in these subtle yet powerful dimensions of speech. Dimensions that remain hidden to many, but which will soon become tools in your growing arsenal of articulate communication. Chapter 3. Command Your Sound. The audience sat motionless, hanging on every word. Though the content was complex, technical information that would normally induce drowsiness, the listeners remained captivated. The speaker hadn't raised her voice or gesticulated wildly. She hadn't relied on shocking statements or controversial claims. Instead, she had done something far more subtle, yet infinitely more powerful. She had mastered the music of her voice. At times, her voice dropped to a near whisper, pulling the audience forward in their seats, creating an intimate connection despite the room's size. At other moments, it rose in volume and intensity, emphasizing critical points with unmistakable clarity. Her pace varied, slowing to allow complex ideas to land, quickening slightly to convey enthusiasm. Most striking were the strategic silences she employed, moments of complete quiet that somehow spoke volumes, creating space for reflection and anticipation. What you've just witnessed is not merely good speaking, it's the art of commanding sound, a dimension of communication that transcends words themselves and taps into something more primal, more visceral, and ultimately more persuasive. In the previous chapters, we explored the foundations of clear speech through articulation and pronunciation. We learned how to form sounds correctly and say words accurately. These skills are essential, but they're only the beginning. Even perfectly articulated words can fall flat if delivered in a monotonous drone. Conversely, a voice that employs strategic variation can elevate even simple words to remarkable impact. This dimension of communication, the melody and rhythm of speech, is what we'll explore in this chapter. It's what transforms mere words into compelling communication. It's what allows you to truly command your sound. But what exactly does it mean to command your sound? The phrase suggests control, mastery, and intentionality, and indeed, these are precisely what we're aiming to develop. To command your sound means to use the full range of your vocal capabilities, strategically and purposefully. It means understanding the elements of vocal delivery and deploying them consciously to enhance your message's clarity, engagement, and impact. Think of your voice as an instrument, perhaps the most versatile instrument ever created. Like any instrument, it has a range of notes, dynamics, and textures. And like any instrument, it can be played with either clumsy imprecision or masterful control. The difference lies not in the instrument itself, but in how skillfully it's used. To play this instrument effectively, we must first understand its components, the elements of vocal delivery that comprise the music of speech. These elements exist beyond the words themselves, in the realm of how those words are delivered. Volume is perhaps the most obvious element, the loudness or softness of your voice. It's about how much acoustic energy you project when speaking. Volume ranges from a whisper that can barely be heard to a shout that fills a large space. While its primary function is ensuring audibility, volume also carries significant emotional and emphasis cues. Pitch refers to the highness or lowness of your voice, where it falls on the musical scale. Every voice has a natural pitch range, But within that range, we constantly vary our pitch as we speak, creating what we call inflection or intonation. These pitch variations form patterns that convey meaning beyond the words themselves. Rate is simply the speed at which you speak, how quickly or slowly words follow one another. Rate affects not only how much time listeners have to process information, but also the energy and emotion perceived in your message. It's the tempo of your vocal music. Pauses are the strategic silences between words or phrases, moments when sound stops but communication continues. Far from being empty space, pauses are active communication tools that provide processing time, create emphasis, signal transitions, and build anticipation. Voice quality, or timbre, is the distinctive character or color of your voice, what makes your voice uniquely yours. While we won't focus extensively on timbre, as it's largely determined by physical characteristics, it's worth acknowledging as part of the full spectrum of vocal elements. Together, these elements create what we might call the music of speech, the melody, rhythm, and dynamics that accompany your words. And like music, this dimension of speech has tremendous power to engage, move, and persuade. The power of vocal variety cannot be overstated. When we speak with varied volume, pitch, rate, and strategic pauses, we create a dynamic experience that naturally captures and maintains attention. Conversely, when we speak in a monotone, with little variation in these elements, we virtually guarantee disengagement. This observation isn't merely anecdotal. The human brain is wired to notice change and to habituate to constancy. When a stimulus remains constant, like a monotone voice, our brains eventually filter it out as background noise. But when a stimulus changes, like a voice with varied delivery, our attention is repeatedly recaptured. This is why monotony quite literally kills engagement. It triggers a neurological tuning out response. Beyond maintaining attention, vocal variety adds layers of meaning, emotion, and emphasis to your words. Consider how the simple phrase, "I didn't say that," can convey completely different meanings depending on which word receives emphasis through increased volume, higher pitch, or slower delivery. Emphasize "I" and you suggest someone else said it. Emphasize "didn't" and you deny saying it at all. Emphasize "that" and you imply you said something else. The words remain identical, but the meaning changes dramatically based solely on vocal delivery. Vocal variety also connects directly to perceived energy and passion. A speaker who uses their full vocal range is typically perceived as more engaged, more committed, and more passionate about their subject. This perception matters enormously because listeners are unlikely to care more about your message than you appear to care about it yourself. When your voice conveys energy and conviction, it signals to listeners that your message matters and that they should pay attention. With this understanding of vocal elements and their importance, let's explore how to master each one, beginning with volume, the element most directly connected to being heard. Finding the right volume level is a contextual challenge that requires assessing several factors. First, consider the environment, the size of the room, the presence of background noise, and the acoustics of the space. A small, quiet room with good acoustics requires less volume than a large, noisy space with poor sound reflection. Audience size also affects optimal volume. Larger audiences generally require more projection, not just because of increased distance, but also because the collective presence of more bodies absorbs sound. However, with modern amplification in many settings, this factor may be less critical than it once was. Perhaps most important is understanding the difference between projection and shouting. Projection involves using proper breath support and vocal technique to increase volume without strain. Shouting, by contrast, involves forcing volume through tension in the throat, which not only sounds harsh, but can also damage your voice over time. The goal is to be comfortably audible to everyone in your audience, without creating the aggressive impression that shouting conveys. Beyond basic audibility, volume can be used strategically to enhance your communication. Varying volume for emphasis is one of the most effective techniques in a speaker's toolkit. Increasing volume slightly on key words or phrases naturally draws attention to them, signaling their importance. This technique is particularly effective when used selectively rather than constantly. Counterintuitively, lowering your volume can sometimes be even more powerful than raising it. When you speak more softly, while still ensuring audibility, you often create a sense of intimacy and confidentiality that draws listeners in. They lean forward, both physically and mentally, to catch what you're saying. This technique creates a connection that makes your message feel personal rather than performative. Regardless of how you vary volume, ensuring consistent audibility throughout your communication is essential. Nothing undermines a message more quickly than portions that simply can't be heard. This means being mindful of maintaining sufficient volume even at the ends of sentences, where many speakers tend to trail off, and being especially conscious of projection when turning away from the audience or looking down at notes. The engine that powers volume is breath support, specifically diaphragmatic breathing. Unlike shallow chest breathing, which provides limited air and creates tension, diaphragmatic breathing engages the large muscle at the base of your lungs, the diaphragm, to draw air deeply into your lungs. This provides the steady airflow needed for sustained, controlled volume without strain. To practice diaphragmatic breathing, place one hand on your chest and the other on your abdomen, just below your rib cage. Breathe in slowly through your nose, focusing on pushing your lower hand outward while keeping your upper hand relatively still. This indicates that you're filling the lower portion of your lungs by engaging your diaphragm. When you exhale, your lower hand should move inward first. Practice this breathing pattern regularly until it becomes natural, then begin to incorporate it when speaking, especially when you need to project your voice. While volume ensures you're heard, pitch adds color and meaning to your words. Understanding how to use pitch effectively begins with recognizing its emotional impact. Higher pitches tend to convey excitement, surprise, or uncertainty. Lower pitches generally communicate seriousness, authority, or certainty. These associations aren't arbitrary. They reflect patterns that exist across cultures and languages. Pitch changes also serve grammatical functions. Rising inflection, where pitch increases at the end of a phrase, typically signals a question or uncertainty. "You're going to the meeting" with rising inflection becomes a question, while "you're going to the meeting" with falling inflection becomes a statement. Similarly, falling inflection, where pitch decreases at the end, signals completion or finality. These patterns help listeners interpret not just what you're saying, but how they should understand it. One of the most common vocal delivery issues is the monotone trap, speaking with minimal pitch variation. This pattern not only induces boredom, but also limits your expressive range and can undermine your message's impact. To avoid this trap, start by identifying your natural pitch range. Record yourself speaking naturally about something you're passionate about, then listen for your highest and lowest comfortable pitches. This range represents your vocal territory, the space within which you can vary your pitch effectively. Once you've identified your range, practice intentional pitch variation on key words. Choose a sentence and experiment with emphasizing different words by raising or lowering your pitch on each. Notice how the meaning shifts with each variation. For example, in the sentence, "I think this approach will work," raising your pitch on "this" emphasizes the specific approach being discussed, while raising it on "work" emphasizes your confidence in the outcome. The key is connecting pitch changes to the meaning you want to convey. Ask yourself what emotion or emphasis each phrase requires, then adjust your pitch accordingly. Is this a moment of excitement that calls for higher pitch? A serious point that needs the authority of lower pitch? A question that should end with rising inflection? By making these connections explicit, you transform pitch from an unconscious habit to a strategic tool. Beyond word-level pitch changes, broader intonation patterns shape the overall flow of your communication. Every language has characteristic intonation patterns, the melodic contours that native speakers naturally follow. In English, statements typically follow a pattern where pitch rises slightly at the beginning, remains relatively level through the middle, and falls at the end. Questions often reverse this pattern, with pitch rising at the end. Becoming conscious of these patterns helps you use them more effectively and avoid unintentional patterns that might confuse listeners. Intonation also signals importance and structure within your communication. Major points often benefit from a wider pitch range, more dramatic rises and falls that signal significance. Subordinate points typically use a narrower range. Similarly, new topics often begin with higher pitch that gradually descends as the topic develops, signaling the arc of a complete thought. These structural signals help listeners organize the information they're receiving, enhancing comprehension and retention. While volume and pitch color your words, rate, the speed of your delivery, determines how much time listeners have to process them. Finding your optimal speaking rate involves balancing several factors and avoiding the pitfalls of extremes. Speaking too quickly creates obvious problems. Clarity suffers as sounds get compressed and distinctions blur. Listeners become overwhelmed, unable to process one idea before the next arrives. They may simply give up trying to follow, especially if the content is complex or unfamiliar. Rapid speech can also create an impression of nervousness or insecurity, undermining your perceived confidence. Speaking too slowly creates different but equally problematic issues. Listeners may become bored or impatient, their minds wandering to fill the gaps between words. Very slow speech can also be perceived as condescending or indicative of uncertainty, neither of which enhances your credibility. The ideal is a conversational sweet spot that allows for both clarity and engagement. For public speaking, a guideline of approximately 125 to 150 words per minute often works well, though this varies based on content complexity and cultural context. This rate allows listeners to process information without feeling either rushed or delayed. Rather than focusing on a specific number, however, it's often more useful to think about matching your rate to your audience's processing needs. More complex or unfamiliar content generally benefits from a slower rate, while familiar or straightforward content can be delivered more quickly without sacrificing comprehension. Beyond your baseline rate, strategic variation creates interest and emphasis. Slowing down for important or complex ideas gives them more weight and provides listeners additional processing time. This technique is particularly effective for key points, complex concepts, or emotional moments that deserve extra space to resonate. Conversely, speeding up slightly can convey excitement, urgency, or building momentum. This technique should be used judiciously as it's easy to cross the line from energetic to unintelligible. The key is maintaining clarity even as you increase pace, articulating clearly while reducing pauses rather than compressing sounds. Perhaps most importantly, your rate should match the emotional content of your message. Excitement, urgency, or enthusiasm naturally call for a quicker pace that reflects and reinforces these emotions. Seriousness, sadness, or thoughtfulness typically benefit from a slower pace that creates space for reflection. This alignment between rate and emotional content creates congruence that enhances your authenticity and impact. While the elements we've discussed so far involve sound, equally powerful is the strategic use of silence through pauses. Far from being empty space or dead air, pauses are active communication tools that serve multiple vital functions. First, pauses allow listeners time to process information. The human brain needs time to absorb, organize, and connect new information to existing knowledge. When you speak continuously without breaks, you deny listeners this processing time, potentially overwhelming them with an uninterrupted stream of input. Strategic pauses create the mental space needed for comprehension, particularly after complex or important points. Pauses also create emphasis before or after important points. A pause before a key statement builds anticipation, signaling that something significant is coming. A pause after an important point creates space for it to resonate, preventing it from being immediately overshadowed by what follows. These emphasis pauses dramatically increase the impact and memorability of your most important ideas. Additionally, pauses signal transitions between ideas, functioning as audible paragraph breaks that help listeners organize information. A slightly longer pause between major points indicates a shift to a new topic or aspect, helping listeners mentally file what they've just heard before opening space for new information. This structural function enhances the overall clarity and coherence of your communication. Finally, pauses give you as the speaker time to think and breathe. Even well-prepared speakers benefit from moments to gather thoughts, check notes, or simply take a breath. These brief respites help maintain your composure and control throughout your delivery, preventing the rushed feeling that can come from speaking without breaks. Different types of pauses serve different functions in your communication. Grammatical pauses occur naturally at punctuation points, brief pauses at commas, slightly longer ones at periods, semicolons, or colons. These pauses help clarify the grammatical structure of your sentences, making them easier to follow. Rhetorical pauses are used specifically for effect, to create emphasis, build suspense, or allow a point to sink in. These pauses are typically longer than grammatical pauses and are placed strategically to enhance impact. A well-placed rhetorical pause can make a key point more memorable than any volume or pitch change. Pregnant pauses build anticipation by creating a moment of tension before delivering an important or surprising point. These extended silences draw listeners in, making them eager to hear what comes next. When used sparingly, pregnant pauses can create powerful moments of connection and impact. While intentional pauses enhance communication, unintentional filled pauses often detract from it. Filled pauses include filler words like like, and phrases such as you know or sort of that occupy space without adding meaning. These verbal habits develop naturally as ways to hold the floor while thinking, but they can become distracting when overused. The first step in addressing filled pauses is simply becoming aware of your specific patterns. Record yourself in conversation or presentation and listen specifically for fillers. Most people are surprised by how frequently they use certain words or sounds without realizing it. Once you're aware of your patterns, practice replacing fillers with intentional silence. When you feel the urge to say or like, simply pause instead. This feels uncomfortable at first. Silence seems longer to the speaker than to the listener, but with practice, it becomes more natural. Remember that a clean pause sounds confident and thoughtful, while filled pauses often sound uncertain. Several strategies can help reduce reliance on fillers. Preparation reduces the need to think on your feet, decreasing filler usage. Slowing down slightly gives you more time to formulate thoughts without fillers. Having a clear structure helps you transition between points without verbal bridges. And practice, both mental rehearsal and actual speaking practice, gradually reduces dependence on these verbal crutches. Now that we've explored each element of vocal delivery, let's put this knowledge into practice with exercises designed to develop your command of sound. Our first exercise focuses on expanding your awareness and control of pitch and volume range. Choose a simple sentence, something neutral like, "Today is a beautiful day," and read it aloud repeatedly, consciously varying your pitch and volume in different combinations. Start by reading it at your normal pitch and volume as a baseline. Then try it with higher pitch and normal volume, then lower pitch and normal volume. Next, maintain your normal pitch, but increase volume, then decrease volume. Finally, experiment with combinations: high pitch and loud volume, high pitch and soft volume, low pitch and loud volume, low pitch and soft volume. As you practice these variations, focus on control and intentionality rather than random changes. Can you maintain a consistent pitch throughout the sentence? Can you change volume without changing pitch, which is surprisingly challenging? Can you make smooth transitions between different pitch and volume levels? This exercise develops both awareness of these elements and the physical control needed to manipulate them effectively. Our second exercise develops control over speaking rate. Select a passage of about 100 to 200 words, perhaps a paragraph from a book or article. First, read it aloud at your normal pace to establish a baseline. Then, read the same passage much slower than feels natural, focusing on clear articulation and appropriate pauses. Next, read it slightly faster than your normal pace, still maintaining clarity. Finally, experiment with varying pace within the passage, slowing for important points, speeding up slightly for less critical information. If you find it helpful, use a timer or word count tool to gauge your rate. Record your baseline reading and count the words to calculate your natural words per minute. Then aim for specific targets in your practice, perhaps 100 WPM for your slow reading and 150 to 175 WPM for your faster reading. This objective feedback helps develop your sense of different rates and your ability to control them consciously. Our final exercise focuses on the strategic use of pauses. Take a short text, perhaps 50 to 100 words, and mark potential places for pauses. Include grammatical pauses at punctuation points, emphasis pauses before or after key words or phrases, and transition pauses between main ideas. Then practice reading the text aloud, honoring these marked pauses. Start by making the pauses slightly longer than feels natural. Perhaps counting silently to 2 for minor pauses and to 3 for major ones. This exaggeration helps establish the habit of pausing deliberately. As the pattern becomes more comfortable, you can adjust to more natural pause lengths while maintaining the strategic placement. Recording yourself during this exercise provides valuable feedback on the effect of your pauses. Often, what feels like an uncomfortably long silence to the speaker sounds perfectly appropriate or even brief to the listener. The recording helps calibrate your internal sense of timing with the actual listener experience. As you incorporate these exercises into your practice routine, remember that commanding your sound is both a technical skill and an expressive art. The technical aspects, controlling volume, pitch, rate, and pauses, provide the foundation. But the artistry comes in using these elements expressively to enhance meaning, convey emotion, and connect with listeners. The ultimate goal is not mechanical precision, but authentic expression, using the full range of your vocal capabilities to communicate with clarity, engagement, and impact. When you truly command your sound, your voice becomes not just a vehicle for words, but a powerful instrument of communication in its own right. The benefits of this mastery extend far beyond formal speaking situations. In everyday conversations, meetings, phone calls, and video conferences, your ability to use volume, pitch, rate, and pauses effectively enhances your ability to be heard, understood, and remembered. It helps you emphasize what matters, create connection, and convey confidence and competence. In our next chapter, we'll explore how to organize your thoughts for maximum clarity and impact. Beyond the sounds of your voice lies the architecture of your ideas, the structure that transforms individual words and sentences into coherent, compelling communication. This hidden framework, invisible to the ear, yet essential to understanding, shapes how your message is received, perhaps even more fundamentally than how it's delivered. The difference between being followed and being forgotten often lies not in what you say or how you say it, but in the invisible blueprint that guides your listeners through the landscape of your ideas. Chapter 4. Structure with Purpose. Two speakers addressed the same audience on the same complex topic. Both possessed equal expertise, similar vocal qualities, and comparable delivery styles. Yet their impact couldn't have been more different. The first speaker began with an intriguing opening, then meandered through a series of points that seemed to connect only in their own mind. Ideas appeared randomly, with no clear progression or relationship. Important concepts were buried among trivial details. By the end, the audience looked confused and disengaged, struggling to articulate what they had just heard. The second speaker also began with an engaging opening, but then something remarkable happened. They clearly stated what they would cover. Their points unfolded in a logical sequence, each building upon the last. Transitions connected ideas seamlessly. Key concepts stood out prominently. When they concluded by summarizing their main points, the audience nodded in recognition, able to recall and explain what they had learned. The difference between these speakers wasn't what they knew or even how they spoke. It was something far more fundamental, yet often invisible, the underlying architecture of their ideas. The second speaker had discovered a truth that eludes many communicators, that structure is not merely an organizational nicety, but the very foundation upon which understanding is built. This invisible framework, this blueprint for clarity, is what we'll explore in this chapter. It's a dimension of communication that operates beneath the surface of words and vocal delivery, yet shapes the listener's experience more profoundly than perhaps any other element. It's what transforms a collection of sentences into a coherent message that can be followed, understood, and remembered. But what exactly do we mean by structure in communication, and why does it matter so much? At its core, structure refers to the deliberate organization of ideas in a logical, coherent pattern. It's the framework that holds your content together, the skeleton that gives your message shape and support. Structure determines not just what you say, but the order in which you say it, the relationships you establish between ideas, and the emphasis you place on different elements. Structure matters because the human mind craves order. We are pattern-seeking creatures, constantly looking for organization and meaning in the information we receive. When we encounter a well-structured message, our minds can process it efficiently, following the path laid out for us. When we encounter a poorly structured message, we must expend significant mental energy trying to impose order on chaos, energy that would be better spent engaging with the content itself. This need for order is not merely a preference, it's a cognitive necessity. The human mind has limited capacity for processing new information. When information comes at us in a disorganized stream, we quickly become overwhelmed, unable to determine what's important or how ideas relate to each other. Our working memory becomes taxed and comprehension suffers. A clear structure helps audiences follow your train of thought without getting lost. It provides a logical path from one idea to the next, creating a sense of progression and coherence. Rather than struggling to connect disparate points, listeners can focus on understanding and engaging with your message. Structure also significantly reduces the cognitive load for listeners. When information is organized logically, the brain doesn't need to work as hard to make sense of it. This frees up mental resources for deeper processing, critical thinking, and retention. The less energy listeners spend trying to organize your ideas, the more they can devote to understanding them. Perhaps most importantly, structure enhances recall and retention. Information presented in an organized framework is significantly easier to remember than information presented randomly. This is because structure provides a mental scaffolding, a set of connections and relationships that help anchor information in memory. When listeners can see how ideas relate to each other within a coherent framework, they're much more likely to remember those ideas later. The benefits of structure extend to you as the speaker as well. A clear structure prevents rambling and tangents, those moments when you lose your way and drift into irrelevant territory. With a solid framework in place, you always know where you are in your message and where you're going next. This keeps your communication focused and purposeful. This clarity of direction builds confidence. When you have a clear roadmap for your communication, you're less likely to experience anxiety about forgetting points or losing your place. You can focus on delivery rather than frantically trying to remember what comes next. This confidence comes through in your presentation, enhancing your credibility and impact. Structure also ensures that all key points are covered logically. Without a planned structure, it's easy to forget important elements or present them in a confusing order. A well-designed framework ensures that each important point receives appropriate attention and appears in the place where it makes the most sense within the overall message. One of the most enduring and effective approaches to structure is remarkably simple. Often called the tell-tell-tell framework, it can be summarized as: tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you've told them. This straightforward approach has stood the test of time because it aligns perfectly with how people process and remember information. The first, tell, is your introduction, where you preview what's to come. This prepares the audience mentally, creating expectations and a framework for understanding. It's like showing someone a map before they begin a journey, so they understand the route and destination. The second tell is the body of your communication, where you deliver your main content in a logical, organized way. This is the journey itself, the substance of your message. The third tell is your conclusion, where you summarize what you've covered. This reinforces key points and helps cement them in memory. It's like reviewing the journey after it's complete, highlighting the important landmarks visited along the way. This simple framework works because it aligns with how memory functions. The preview creates anticipation and a mental framework. The content fills in that framework. The summary reinforces what's been learned, increasing the likelihood of retention. Despite its simplicity, or perhaps because of it, this structure remains one of the most effective ways to organize any communication. With this understanding of why structure matters, let's explore how to craft each component of a well-structured message, beginning with the introduction. The introduction serves as the gateway to your message, and its quality often determines whether listeners will engage with what follows. An effective introduction accomplishes several crucial goals. First and foremost, it grabs attention, hooking the audience from the start. In a world of constant distractions and limited attention spans, this initial capture of interest is essential. Without it, even the most valuable content may go unheard. The introduction also reveals the topic and states your purpose, clearly defining what you'll discuss. This clarity helps listeners decide whether your message is relevant to them and prepares them for what's to come. Ambiguity or vagueness at this stage creates confusion that can undermine the rest of your communication. Briefly establishing credibility or goodwill answers the implicit question in every audience member's mind: why should I listen to you? This doesn't require extensive credentials or self-promotion, just enough information to establish that you're a trustworthy source on the topic at hand. Finally, the introduction previews your main points, providing a roadmap for the listener. This preview creates expectations and a mental framework that helps listeners organize the information they're about to receive. It's like giving them the chapter titles before they read the book, helping them understand how the pieces will fit together. Several techniques can effectively capture attention at the beginning of your communication. Asking a rhetorical question engages the audience's minds actively, prompting them to think about their own answer. Have you ever wondered why some people can command attention the moment they speak, while others struggle to be heard? This type of opening creates immediate mental engagement with your topic. Starting with a startling statistic or fact can create immediate interest through surprise or concern. 3 out of 4 people report feeling anxious about public speaking, more than fear death. Unexpected or striking information naturally captures attention and creates curiosity about what will follow. Using a compelling quote can leverage the wisdom or authority of others to draw listeners in. Maya Angelou once said, "Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning." Well-chosen quotes can establish the theme of your message while adding credibility and interest. Relating the topic directly to the audience makes the relevance immediate and personal. The ability to structure your thoughts clearly will determine whether your next big idea gets implemented or ignored. When listeners understand how your topic affects them personally, their attention naturally sharpens. After capturing attention, clearly stating your purpose and previewing your main points creates the framework for everything that follows. A concise thesis or purpose statement defines the scope and focus of your communication. This statement should be specific enough to provide clear direction, but broad enough to encompass all your main points. Today, I'll show you how strategic structure can transform your communication from confusing to compelling, provides a clear focus while setting expectations. Following your purpose statement with a preview of main points completes the roadmap. We'll explore 3 essential elements of effective structure: creating a compelling introduction, organizing your content logically, and crafting a memorable conclusion. This preview helps listeners anticipate what's coming and understand how the pieces will fit together. It creates mental folders ready to receive and organize the information you'll present. With a strong introduction in place, the focus shifts to building a logical body, the core of your message where main ideas are presented and developed. This process begins with identifying your main points, the key ideas that support your overall purpose. Most effective communications include between 2 and 5 main points. Fewer than 2 may not adequately support your purpose. More than 5 becomes difficult for listeners to track and remember. The specific number depends on your purpose, time constraints, and the complexity of each point. These main points should be distinct from each other, with minimal overlap. Each should represent a separate aspect or dimension of your overall topic. They should also be relatively balanced in importance and development. While perfect equality isn't necessary, significant imbalance, where one point receives extensive treatment while others are barely mentioned, creates a lopsided message that confuse listeners about your priorities. Each main point should be phrased clearly and concisely. Aim for wording that is specific enough to be meaningful, but brief enough to be memorable. Effective structure enhances audience comprehension, is clearer and more memorable than then. The implementation of strategic organizational patterns within oral discourse has been demonstrated to facilitate enhanced cognitive processing and retention of information by listeners in various contexts. Once you've identified your main points, the next step is choosing an organizational pattern that best fits your purpose and content. Different types of content naturally lend themselves to different organizational structures. Chronological organization follows a time sequence, moving from earlier to later events or stages. This pattern works well for processes, historical developments, or any content with a natural time progression. The evolution of communication technology has progressed through 3 major phases: the print era, the broadcast era, and the digital era. Spatial organization arranges information according to physical location or direction. This pattern is useful for describing objects, places, or physical relationships. Understanding the human voice requires examining 3 areas: the lungs and diaphragm, the vocal cords, and the articulators. Topical organization breaks the main topic into logical subtopics without following a specific time or space sequence. This flexible pattern works for many types of content where the relationships between points are conceptual rather than sequential. Effective communication relies on 3 key elements: clear structure, engaging delivery, and relevant content. Problem-solution organization first identifies a problem or need, then proposes a solution or response. This pattern is particularly effective for persuasive messages where you're advocating for a specific action or approach. Many professionals struggle with disorganized communication. Implementing the structure principles in this chapter will address this challenge. Cause-effect organization shows the relationship between causes and their results, or effects and their origins. This pattern helps explain why things happen or what consequences might follow from certain conditions. Poor message structure leads to 3 negative outcomes: confusion, disengagement, and forgotten content. The choice of organizational pattern should be guided by your purpose and the nature of your content. The best pattern is the one that creates the most logical flow for your specific message. Sometimes you might combine patterns, perhaps using problem solution for the overall structure while organizing the solution section topically. With your organizational pattern selected, the next step is developing each main point effectively. This development begins with clearly stating the main point itself, expressing the core idea in a direct, understandable way. This statement serves as a signpost, alerting listeners that you're moving to a new major section of your message. Following this statement, you'll provide supporting material that elaborates, explains, or proves the main point. This support might include examples, statistics, expert opinions, explanations, or other forms of evidence appropriate to your topic. The specific types of supporting material will be explored in depth in Chapter 6, but the key principle is that each main point needs adequate development to be fully understood and accepted. Equally important is explaining the connection between your supporting material and the main point it's meant to reinforce. Never assume that listeners will automatically see how evidence relates to your claim. Make these connections explicit. This example illustrates how structure enhances memory by providing a framework for organizing new information. These explanatory links ensure that your support actually strengthens your main points rather than just adding information. As you move through your main points, creating cohesion becomes crucial. Without clear connections between ideas, even well-organized points can seem disconnected, leaving listeners struggling to see how everything fits together. This is where transitions and signposts play a vital role. Transitions are words, phrases, or sentences that connect ideas by showing their relationship. They signal the move from one point to the next while indicating how these points relate to each other. Effective transitions create a sense of flow and progression rather than a series of disconnected ideas. These connecting elements show various relationships between ideas. They might indicate addition, furthermore, in addition, moreover, contrast, however, on the other hand, conversely, cause-effect, therefore, as a result, consequently, sequence, first, next, finally, or example, for instance, to illustrate, as an example. Beyond single words or phrases, more developed transitions can create stronger connections. Internal summaries briefly recap the point just made before moving on. So we've seen how structure reduces cognitive load for listeners. Now let's examine how it enhances retention. Internal previews hint at what's coming next. Having explored the importance of clear main points, let's now turn to how these points should be organized. These more developed transitions are particularly valuable when moving between major sections of your message or when connections might not be immediately obvious to listeners. They help bridge potential gaps in understanding and maintain the logical flow of your ideas. Complementing transitions are signposts, brief statements that indicate where you are in the structure of your message. These verbal markers help the audience track progress through your communication. The first key element of effective structure is moving to our second major point. Finally, let's consider signposts serve as navigational aids, helping listeners maintain their orientation within your message. They reinforce the structure you outlined in your introduction, reminding listeners of the framework you're following. This reinforcement is particularly important in longer communications, where listeners might lose track of where they are in the overall structure. Signposts also emphasize the importance of main points by explicitly marking them. When you say the most crucial factor to consider is, you signal to listeners that special attention should be paid to what follows. This emphasis helps listeners distinguish between main points and supporting details, creating appropriate hierarchies of importance. As you approach the end of your message, crafting a memorable conclusion becomes your final structural task. The conclusion serves as the last opportunity to reinforce your message and leave a lasting impression. Like the introduction, it serves several specific goals. First, the conclusion signals the end of your communication. This might seem obvious, but clear verbal cues that you're concluding help listeners mentally prepare for the end of your message. Phrases like, in conclusion, to summarize, or as we've seen, alert the audience that you're entering the final phase of your communication. The conclusion also summarizes your main points, reinforcing the key takeaways you want listeners to remember. This summary serves as a memory aid, highlighting the most important elements of your message. Given that listeners typically remember the beginning and end of a communication better than the middle, this final reinforcement significantly enhances retention. Finally, the conclusion provides closure or a call to action, leaving a lasting impression. This might involve inspiring listeners, challenging them to apply what they've learned, or motivating specific actions. The conclusion should provide a sense of completion while also pointing forward to implications or applications. Several techniques can create effective conclusions. Restating your thesis and main points in new words reinforces your message without sounding repetitive. This isn't simply repeating what you've said before, but recasting it in fresh language that captures the essence of your message. Ending with a powerful quote can provide a memorable final thought that encapsulates your message. As Winston Churchill said, if you have an important point to make, don't try to be subtle or clever. Use a pile driver. Hit the point once, then come back and hit it again, then hit it a third time, a tremendous whack. The right quote can add authority and eloquence to your conclusion. Referring back to the introduction creates a satisfying sense of completion, a technique often called bookending. If you began with a question, answer it. If you started with a scenario, return to it with new insight. This circular structure creates a sense of resolution and wholeness. Issuing a challenge or call to action gives listeners something specific to do with the information you've provided. Starting today, apply these structure principles to every important communication. Your ideas deserve to be understood, and your listeners deserve clarity. This forward-looking element transforms passive listening into potential action. Ending with a final memorable thought or image leaves a lasting impression. Structure in communication is like the foundation of a building, invisible to casual observers, yet supporting everything that rises above it. A vivid final image or thought often becomes the most remembered element of your entire message. Now that we've explored the components of effective structure, let's put this knowledge into practice with exercises designed to develop your structural skills. Our first exercise focuses on creating complete outlines. Choose a simple topic you're familiar with, perhaps a process you know well or a concept you understand clearly. Create a full sentence outline with an introduction, body, using one of the organizational patterns we've discussed, and conclusion. In the introduction, include an attention getter, a clear purpose statement, and a preview of main points. For the body, identify 2 to 4 main points that support your purpose, and under each main point, include at least 2 pieces of supporting material. Add transitions between main points to show their relationships. In the conclusion, include a signal that you're concluding, a summary of main points, and a final thought or call to action. As you create this outline, focus on clear main points and logical flow between them. Ask yourself, does each main point directly support my purpose? Are my main points distinct from each other? Does the chosen organizational pattern create a logical progression? Would someone reading just my main points understand the basic structure of my message? Our second exercise expands your repertoire of transition words and phrases. Create a list of transitions for different types of relationships. Addition, connecting similar ideas. Contrast, connecting different or opposing ideas. Cause-effect, showing causality. Sequence, showing order or progression. And example, introducing illustrations or instances. Challenge yourself to go beyond the most common transitions. Instead of just first, second, third, explore alternatives like initially, subsequently, ultimately. Instead of always using, for example, try to illustrate, consider this instance, or a case in point is. This variety will make your transitions more interesting and precise. Once you've created your list, practice inserting varied transitions into the outline from the first exercise. Replace basic transitions with more specific ones that clearly show the relationships between your ideas. Notice how different transitions can subtly change how the relationship between ideas is perceived. Our final exercise focuses on crafting effective introductions and conclusions. Using the outline you created in the first exercise, write 2 different introductions and 2 different conclusions, each using different techniques. For the introductions, you might try one that begins with a rhetorical question and another that starts with a surprising fact. For the conclusions, perhaps one could end with a call to action, while another uses a memorable image or thought. After writing these variations, evaluate which versions best fulfill the goals of the introduction and conclusion. Which introduction most effectively captures attention and clearly previews what's to come? Which conclusion most powerfully reinforces your message and leaves a lasting impression? This comparative analysis will help you develop a sense for what makes openings and closings truly effective. As you work through these exercises, remember that structure is not a rigid formula, but a flexible framework. The principles we've discussed can be adapted to various contexts and purposes. A casual explanation to a colleague might use a simpler structure than a formal presentation, but the fundamental need for logical organization remains the same. The goal is not perfect adherence to structural rules, but effective communication that helps listeners understand, engage with, and remember your message. Structure serves this goal by creating a clear path through your ideas, a path that both you and your listeners can follow with confidence. The benefits of mastering structure extend far beyond formal speaking situations. In everyday conversations, emails, meetings, and discussions, clear structure makes your communication more effective and efficient. It helps you express yourself more clearly, be understood more accurately, and have greater impact with your words. In our next chapter, we'll explore a dimension of communication that transforms generic messages into targeted ones. Beyond what you say and how you structure it lies a crucial question: who are you saying it to? The answer to this question shapes every aspect of effective communication, from the examples you choose to the language you use. This hidden factor, often overlooked by even experienced communicators, can determine whether your perfectly articulated, beautifully structured message resonates deeply or falls completely flat. The difference between connection and disconnection often hinges on this single element that we'll uncover together. Chapter 5. Know Your People. The presentation was flawless, or so the speaker thought. Her articulation was precise, her vocal delivery commanding, her structure impeccable. She had spent weeks perfecting every aspect of her talk, crafting each sentence with care, rehearsing until every pause and inflection felt natural. By any technical measure, it was a masterpiece of public speaking. Yet as she looked out at her audience, she saw furrowed brows, wandering eyes, and the unmistakable blue glow of smartphone screens. Despite her technical excellence, something essential was missing, something so fundamental that without it, all her skill and preparation had fallen flat. What had gone wrong? The answer lies in a dimension of communication that transcends technique, structure, and even content itself. It's a factor so powerful that it can render a technically perfect presentation ineffective or elevate a simple message to profound impact. It's the hidden element that determines whether your words connect or merely collide with your listeners. This missing element wasn't about the speaker at all. It was about those on the receiving end of her message. In her meticulous focus on what she wanted to say and how she wanted to say it, she had overlooked the most crucial question of all: who was she saying it to? This question, and the profound shift in perspective it represents, is the heart of what it means to know your people. But this phrase contains depths that may not be immediately apparent. It suggests a fundamental truth about communication that many speakers never fully grasp: that effective communication is not about you, the speaker. It's about them, the audience. This may seem obvious, yet it represents one of the most significant blind spots in how most people approach communication. We naturally begin with ourselves, with what we want to say, what we find interesting, what we believe is important. We craft messages from our own perspective, using language that makes sense to us, examples that resonate with our experiences, and arguments that align with our values. This speaker-centered approach feels natural because it starts where we are, but it often fails precisely because it stays where we are, never making the crucial journey to where our audience is. The result is communication that may be technically sound but fundamentally disconnected from those it aims to reach. The alternative is audience-centered communication, an approach that begins not with what you want to say, but with who you're saying it to. It prioritizes the needs, interests, and perspectives of your listeners above your own preferences or convenience. It recognizes that communication is not merely about transmitting information, but about creating understanding, connection, and resonance. This shift in focus, from speaker to audience, transforms every aspect of communication. It changes what you say, how you say it, and the impact your words ultimately have. It's the difference between speaking at people and speaking with them, between being merely heard and being truly understood. The limitations of focusing solely on what you want to say become clear when we consider how communication actually works. Communication isn't simply about sending messages. It's about messages being received, understood, and acted upon. If your audience doesn't understand your message, doesn't find it relevant, or doesn't accept it as valid, then no communication has truly occurred, regardless of how eloquently you've spoken. Audience-centered communication recognizes this reality and responds by making the audience's needs and perspectives the starting point for message development. Rather than beginning with, "What do I want to say?" it begins with, "What does my audience need to hear?" Rather than asking, "How can I express my ideas clearly?" it asks, "How will my audience best understand and connect with these ideas?" This approach doesn't diminish the importance of your message or your expertise. Rather, it ensures that your knowledge and insights are presented in ways that can be genuinely received and valued by those you're addressing. It recognizes that the ultimate goal of communication is not merely to express yourself, but to create resonance and connection, to have your message not just heard, but embraced. This perspective shift is more than just a philosophical stance. It's a practical necessity for effective communication. Audience analysis, the systematic consideration of who your listeners are and what matters to them, is crucial for several concrete reasons. First, understanding your audience allows you to increase relevance and engagement. When your message connects directly to your listeners' interests, concerns, and experiences, they're naturally more attentive and involved. They see immediately why they should care about what you're saying, rather than having to figure it out for themselves. Or worse, never seeing the relevance at all. Second, audience analysis enhances comprehension by helping you meet your audience where they are. When you understand what your listeners already know about your topic, you can build bridges from their existing knowledge to new information. You can avoid explaining what they already understand, which wastes time and creates boredom, while ensuring you don't skip essential background they need, which creates confusion. Third, knowing your audience improves persuasiveness by allowing you to address their specific values and concerns. Arguments that might be compelling to you may fall flat with a different audience if they don't align with their priorities or worldview. When you understand what matters to your listeners, you can frame your message in ways that connect with their values and address their particular concerns. Finally, audience analysis helps you avoid unintentional offense or misunderstanding. Different groups may interpret the same words or examples differently based on their backgrounds, experiences, or cultural contexts. What seems perfectly clear or appropriate to you might be confusing or even offensive to others. Understanding these potential differences allows you to communicate more sensitively and effectively. To gain this understanding, you need to consider several key factors about your audience. These factors fall into three main categories: demographic, situational, and psychographic. Demographic factors include characteristics like age, gender, cultural background, education level, and group membership. These basic attributes can provide initial insights into your audience's potential perspectives and preferences. For instance, different generations may have different communication styles, cultural references, or technological comfort levels. Educational background might influence vocabulary expectations and familiarity with certain concepts. However, demographics must be considered cautiously. While they can provide useful general information, they can also lead to oversimplification or stereotyping if applied too rigidly. Remember that every audience is composed of individuals who may not conform to general patterns associated with their demographic groups. Use demographic insights as a starting point for consideration, not as definitive conclusions about your specific audience. Situational factors focus on the context of your communication. Audience size and setting significantly impact how you should communicate. A small, informal gathering allows for more interaction and personal connection than a large, formal presentation. The physical environment, whether it's a comfortable conference room, a large auditorium, or a virtual meeting, creates different dynamics that affect how your message is received. The audience's disposition toward your topic is another crucial situational factor. Are they already interested and knowledgeable? Neutral but open-minded? Skeptical or even hostile? These different starting points require different approaches. An interested audience might welcome detailed information and technical language, while a skeptical one might need more fundamental explanations and stronger evidence. Similarly, the audience's disposition toward you as the speaker affects their receptiveness. If they already know and trust you, they'll likely give you the benefit of the doubt. If you're unknown to them, you'll need to establish credibility. If there's existing skepticism about you personally, you'll need to address that before your message can be fully heard. The occasion for the communication also shapes expectations and appropriate approaches. A training session, a motivational talk, a decision-making meeting, and a ceremonial address all call for different tones, structures, and content focuses. Understanding the purpose of the occasion helps you align your message with what the audience expects and needs from that particular communication event. Perhaps most important are psychographic factors, the attitudes, beliefs, values, and motivations that shape how your audience thinks and what they care about. These internal factors often have the greatest impact on how your message is received, yet they can be the hardest to discern from surface observations. Understanding what your audience already knows about your topic helps you avoid both patronizing explanations of the obvious and confusing leaps that omit necessary background. Their existing opinions or beliefs about your topic create the starting point from which they'll evaluate your message. If these existing views aren't acknowledged and addressed, they can become barriers to acceptance of new perspectives. The underlying values and motivations of your audience, what they fundamentally care about and why, provide the key to creating messages that resonate at a deeper level. When you connect your message to these core values, you move beyond mere intellectual agreement to emotional engagement and commitment. Finally, understanding your audience's specific needs and interests related to your topic allows you to focus on what matters most to them. What problems are they trying to solve? What goals are they trying to achieve? What questions do they most want answered? Addressing these specific concerns makes your message immediately relevant and valuable. Gathering this audience information requires both direct and indirect methods, depending on what's available and appropriate for your situation. Direct methods involve explicitly asking for information through conversations, surveys, or interviews. Before a scheduled presentation, you might speak with the organizer about the expected audience composition and interests. For ongoing communications with a defined group, surveys can provide systematic insights into their knowledge, preferences, and needs. Even informal conversations with representative members of your target audience can yield valuable insights. When direct methods aren't possible or sufficient, indirect methods can help fill the gaps. Observation, both before and during your communication, provides real-time feedback about your audience's engagement and responses. Watching body language, facial expressions, and attention levels gives immediate clues about what's working and what isn't. Making educated guesses based on demographics or group affiliation can provide a starting point when specific information isn't available. If you're addressing a professional association, for instance, you can reasonably infer certain shared knowledge and interests based on their field. Research about the group or organization you're addressing, reviewing their website, publications, or mission statement can reveal priorities, values, and current concerns. Underlying all these methods is perhaps the most powerful tool for audience understanding: empathy. Empathy involves genuinely trying to see your topic from the audience's point of view, to step outside your own perspective and into theirs. This isn't merely an intellectual exercise, but an emotional one as well, requiring you to connect with how your audience might feel about and respond to your message. A particularly useful empathetic question is, what's in it for them? Often abbreviated as YFM. This question forces you to articulate the specific value or benefit your message offers to this particular audience. If you can't clearly identify what your listeners will gain from paying attention to you, you may need to reconsider either your content or how you're framing it. Once you've gathered information about your audience, the next step is adapting your message based on this understanding. This adaptation occurs across multiple dimensions of your communication, from content selection to language choice to delivery style. Content adaptation begins with selecting relevant main points and supporting material. Not everything you know about your topic will be equally important or interesting to every audience. Based on your audience analysis, prioritize the aspects that most directly address their needs, interests, and questions. Choose examples and evidence that will resonate with their experiences and values. The level of detail and complexity should also be tailored to your audience's knowledge level and information needs. Too much detail for a novice audience creates confusion and overwhelm. Too little for an expert audience seems superficial and wastes their time. Similarly, complex concepts might need extensive explanation for some audiences, but just a brief mention for others who are already familiar with them. Focus particularly on benefits and outcomes relevant to your specific audience. Different audiences will care about different aspects of the same topic based on their roles, responsibilities, and priorities. A technical feature that excites engineers might mean little to executives who care more about business outcomes. A teaching method that appeals to educators for its pedagogical soundness might need to be presented to parents in terms of how it will help their children succeed. Language adaptation is equally important for connecting with your audience. Choose words that your audience will understand without unnecessary effort. This doesn't mean dumbing down your message, but rather expressing it in terms that are accessible to your particular listeners. The goal is clarity and connection, not displaying your vocabulary or mastery of technical terminology. When technical terms are necessary, define them clearly for audiences who may not be familiar with them. For highly specialized audiences, appropriate technical language demonstrates your knowledge and credibility. For general audiences, however, excessive jargon creates barriers to understanding and can make you seem either unaware of your audience's needs or deliberately exclusionary. Use inclusive language that respects the diversity of your audience. Be mindful of terms that might inadvertently exclude or marginalize certain groups. This isn't about political correctness, but about effective communication. Language that makes some audience members feel excluded or disrespected creates barriers to your message being received. The formality of your language should match the situation and audience expectations. A casual conversational style works well in some contexts, but may seem unprofessional or unprepared in others. Similarly, highly formal language may be appropriate for certain ceremonial occasions, but could create unnecessary distance in more collaborative settings. Beyond content and language, connecting with your audience's interests and perspectives creates deeper engagement. Use examples that resonate with their experiences rather than just your own. An example that perfectly illustrates your point but comes from a context completely unfamiliar to your audience won't have the impact you intend. Link your message to your audience's existing knowledge and values whenever possible. New information is more readily accepted and remembered when it connects to what people already know and care about. These connections create hooks that help your message stick in your audience's minds. When addressing potentially divisive topics, acknowledge different viewpoints respectfully. This doesn't mean you can't advocate for a particular position, but recognizing that reasonable people might disagree demonstrates respect for your audience's intelligence and autonomy. This respect makes them more likely to genuinely consider your perspective, even if they initially disagree. Your delivery style should also adapt based on audience factors. Modify your tone based on the audience's disposition toward your topic. An enthusiastic, high-energy delivery might engage an already interested audience, but could seem insensitive or off-putting to a skeptical or concerned one. Match your emotional tone to what's appropriate for both your content and your audience's likely state of mind. Similarly, adapt your level of interaction based on audience size and formality. A small group in an informal setting might welcome discussion, questions, and participation. A large audience in a formal venue might expect a more structured presentation with limited interaction. Understanding these expectations helps you create an experience that feels appropriate and comfortable for your specific situation. One of the most challenging aspects of audience-centered communication is connecting across differences, bridging gaps of culture, perspective, or viewpoint. These situations require additional awareness and adaptation. When communicating with culturally diverse audiences, recognize that communication styles vary significantly across cultures. Some cultures value directness and explicitness. Others prefer more indirect, contextual communication. Some emphasize emotional expression. Others prize restraint. Some encourage questioning and debate. Others place higher value on harmony and consensus. Being aware of these potential differences helps you interpret responses accurately and adjust your approach appropriately. Seek common ground and shared values that transcend cultural differences. Despite varying backgrounds and perspectives, most people share certain fundamental concerns and aspirations for security, respect, opportunity, connection, and meaning. Finding these points of commonality creates bridges that can span significant differences in specific viewpoints or experiences. Be mindful of nonverbal communication differences as well. Eye contact, physical distance, gestures, and other nonverbal signals carry different meanings in different cultures. What seems like attentiveness in one context might seem aggressive in another. What appears respectful in one setting might seem evasive in another. Awareness of these potential differences helps you avoid misinterpreting others' signals or sending unintended messages through your own nonverbal behavior. When facing disagreement or resistance, acknowledge opposing views respectfully rather than dismissing or ignoring them. Recognizing the validity of concerns or alternative perspectives demonstrates that you're engaging with your audience's thinking rather than simply trying to override it. This acknowledgement creates space for genuine consideration rather than defensive rejection of your ideas. Focus on shared goals or values even when specific viewpoints differ. Often, disagreements occur not over fundamental aims, but over the best means to achieve them. Highlighting the common destination while discussing different possible routes can reduce the perception of conflict and create more openness to alternative approaches. Provide strong evidence and logical reasoning that addresses your audience's specific concerns and questions. Different audiences find different types of evidence compelling based on their values, experiences, and thinking styles. Some respond strongly to data and statistics. Others find personal testimonials more convincing. Some value historical precedent. Others prioritize innovative thinking. Understanding what your particular audience finds persuasive allows you to present your case in the most effective way. Let's now put these principles into practice with exercises designed to develop your audience analysis and adaptation skills. Our first exercise focuses on creating audience profiles. Choose a topic you know well, perhaps something related to your profession or a personal interest. Now imagine presenting this topic to 3 distinctly different audiences. Perhaps a group of high school students, a gathering of industry experts, and a community organization. For each audience, describe how you would adapt your presentation in terms of content, language, and delivery. What main points would you emphasize for each group? What examples would resonate with their experiences? What level of technical language would be appropriate? What tone and style would best connect with them? As you develop these adaptations, consider the full range of factors we've discussed: demographic, situational, and psychographic. How might age, education level, or cultural background influence your approach? What about the setting and purpose of the presentation? Most importantly, what would each audience already know, believe, and care about regarding your topic? This exercise develops your ability to think systematically about audience differences and to create targeted approaches rather than one-size-fits-all messages. The goal isn't to create 3 entirely different presentations, but rather to thoughtfully adapt a core message to connect effectively with different listeners. Our second exercise, the Jargon Buster, develops your skill in translating specialized language into accessible terms. Find a short passage of technical or specialized text from your field or any area with distinctive terminology. This might be a paragraph from a professional journal, a section of a technical manual, or content from a specialized website. Rewrite this passage for a general audience, eliminating jargon and simplifying complex concepts without losing the essential meaning. Focus on clarity and everyday language while maintaining accuracy. The goal isn't to oversimplify or dumb down the content, but to make it accessible to someone without specialized knowledge in that area. This exercise builds awareness of how specialized language can create barriers to understanding for those outside a particular field. It develops your ability to express complex ideas in straightforward terms, a valuable skill for communicating with diverse audiences or explaining your expertise to those who don't share your background. Our final exercise uses empathy mapping to develop a deeper understanding of your audience's perspective. Choose a specific topic and a defined audience. Create an empathy map by considering what this audience might be thinking, feeling, seeing, hearing, and experiencing in relation to your topic. What thoughts might they have about this subject? What emotions might it evoke? What related information are they exposed to in their environment? What challenges or frustrations, pains, might they associate with this topic? What benefits or desires, gains, might they connect to it? This exercise moves beyond surface characteristics to a deeper understanding of your audience's internal experience. It helps you connect with their perspective emotionally as well as intellectually, creating insights that can make your communication more resonant and relevant. As you practice these exercises, remember that audience analysis is not about manipulating listeners, but about serving them better. The goal is not to trick people into agreeing with you, but to present your message in ways that allow it to be genuinely heard, understood, and considered. Audience-centered communication is fundamentally about respect, recognizing that effective communication requires meeting people where they are rather than expecting them to come to you. This respect for your audience transforms not just how you communicate, but how your communication is received. When people feel understood and valued, when they sense that you've taken the time to consider their perspective and address their concerns, they're naturally more receptive to your message. They're more likely to engage actively, consider your ideas openly, and remember what you've shared. In this way, knowing your people isn't just a technique for more effective communication. It's an approach that creates more meaningful connections. It transforms communication from a one-way transmission of information to a shared experience of understanding. It recognizes that at its heart, communication isn't about speakers and listeners, but about human beings connecting with other human beings. In our next chapter, we'll explore a dimension of communication that transforms mere assertions into compelling arguments. Beyond understanding your audience lies the challenge of convincing them, of providing the substance that gives your words weight and credibility. This hidden element, often overlooked in discussions of communication skill, can determine whether your message is accepted or rejected, believed or dismissed. The difference between being heard and being heeded often depends on this crucial factor that we'll uncover together. Chapter 6. Support your ideas. I believe communication skills are the most important factor in professional success. How did you react to that statement? Did you immediately accept it as true, or did you find yourself thinking, says who, or prove it? Perhaps you wondered, based on what evidence, or compared to what other factors? If you experienced any of these questions or doubts, you've just encountered one of the most fundamental principles of effective communication. Assertions alone are rarely persuasive. No matter how confidently stated or how inherently reasonable a claim might be, the human mind naturally seeks something more. It craves substance behind statements, evidence behind assertions, proof behind proclamations. This natural skepticism, this instinctive desire for support, reveals a crucial dimension of articulate communication that goes beyond the mechanics of clear speech, the music of vocal delivery, the architecture of structure, or even the adaptation to audience needs. It points to something more fundamental, the need to give your ideas weight, credibility, and impact through effective supporting material. But what exactly constitutes supporting material? And why does it matter so much to the effectiveness of your communication? At its core, supporting material refers to the evidence, examples, explanations, and illustrations that strengthen, clarify, and amplify your main points. It's everything that moves your communication beyond mere claims to substantiated arguments. It's what transforms abstract concepts into concrete understanding, vague generalities into vivid specifics, and questionable assertions into credible positions. The difference between unsupported claims and well-supported arguments is the difference between saying "trust me" and giving people genuine reasons to trust you. It's the difference between asking for belief and earning conviction. And in a world where audiences are increasingly sophisticated, skeptical, and overwhelmed with information, this difference can determine whether your message is accepted or dismissed, remembered or forgotten, acted upon or ignored. Consider how differently you might respond to these two versions of the same basic message. Version 1. Effective communication skills are crucial for professional success. Version 2. Effective communication skills are crucial for professional success. A recent survey of Fortune 500 executives found that communication ability was the single most important factor in promotion decisions, ranking above technical expertise, work ethic, or educational background. As one CEO put it, "I can teach technical skills, but I can't teach someone to communicate clearly." This reflects a fundamental reality of professional environments. Ideas only have impact when they can be effectively conveyed to others. The first version makes a reasonable claim, but provides no reason to accept it beyond the speaker's implicit authority. The second version supports the same claim with survey data, expert testimony, and explanatory reasoning. The difference in persuasive power is immediate and significant. This illustrates the first and most fundamental reason why support matters. Claims alone are not persuasive. Assertions without evidence rarely change minds or inspire action. Even when your audience is predisposed to agree with you, unsupported claims feel insubstantial and forgettable. When your audience is neutral or skeptical, unsupported claims are easily dismissed. Supporting material provides the proof that builds belief. It demonstrates that your positions aren't merely personal opinions, but are grounded in evidence, reasoning, or shared experience. This proof creates a foundation for acceptance that mere assertions cannot achieve. This foundation becomes especially important when facing skepticism or competing viewpoints. In such contexts, supporting material strengthens your message against challenges by anticipating and addressing potential objections. It shows that you've considered the issue thoroughly and aren't simply stating preferences or untested assumptions. Beyond persuasion, supporting material serves another crucial function: clarification. Abstract ideas become concrete and understandable when illustrated with specific examples, analogies, or descriptions. Consider how much clearer the abstract concept of effective communication becomes when illustrated with specific behaviors, techniques, or scenarios that demonstrate what it looks like in practice. Support also helps illustrate the significance or impact of your points. It's one thing to claim that a problem is serious. It's another to show its magnitude through statistics, its human impact through narratives, or its implications through logical extension. Supporting material helps audiences not just understand your points, but appreciate why they matter. This clarification function naturally enhances engagement as well. Concrete, vivid supporting material makes your message more interesting and memorable than abstract generalizations alone. It provides the color, texture, and dimension that capture and maintain attention throughout your communication. Perhaps most importantly, effective supporting material significantly enhances both your credibility and your message's memorability. When you incorporate relevant research, expert opinions, or thoughtful analysis, you demonstrate knowledge and preparation. This demonstration builds trust in you as a source of information and insight. Audiences are more likely to accept your conclusions when they can see the solid foundation upon which they're built. Supporting material also makes your points stickier and easier to recall. While abstract principles or general statements tend to fade quickly from memory, concrete examples, vivid descriptions, and meaningful statistics create stronger mental impressions that persist over time. When your audience can visualize your points through illustrative support, those points become anchored in memory rather than floating away as soon as your words end. Additionally, well-chosen supporting material creates connection with your audience through relatable examples or narratives. When people see their own experiences or concerns reflected in your support, they develop a personal investment in your message. This connection transforms communication from a one-way transmission of information to a shared exploration of meaningful ideas. With these benefits in mind, let's explore the various types of supporting material available to you, the tools in your toolkit for building stronger, clearer, and more persuasive communication. Examples are perhaps the most versatile and accessible form of support. They make abstract ideas concrete by showing rather than just telling. They transform general principles into specific instances that audiences can visualize and understand. Brief examples provide quick illustrations that clarify without derailing your main flow. Effective listening involves nonverbal feedback, such as nodding or maintaining eye contact. This simple example immediately clarifies what might otherwise remain an abstract concept. Extended examples offer more detailed scenarios that allow for deeper exploration of a concept. These might describe a specific situation, process, or application in enough detail to create a complete picture. Extended examples are particularly useful for complex ideas that can't be adequately illustrated in a sentence or two. Hypothetical examples imagine possible situations to illustrate principles or consequences. Imagine you're presenting to senior executives when one challenges your central premise. Without preparation for objections, you might become defensive or flustered, undermining your credibility. These what-if scenarios help audiences envision applications or implications they might not have considered. Examples serve multiple functions simultaneously. They clarify by showing what you mean, they personalize by connecting abstract ideas to human experience, and they reinforce by providing concrete instances that support your general claims. Their versatility makes them essential in almost any form of communication. Descriptions and narratives take the power of examples further by painting detailed pictures that engage the senses and emotions. Effective descriptions use sensory details to create vivid imagery that audiences can see, hear, feel, or even taste and smell in their minds. This sensory engagement creates stronger impressions than abstract explanations alone. Storytelling represents one of the most powerful forms of supporting material available. Humans are naturally wired for narrative. We think in stories, remember in stories, and connect through stories. Research consistently shows that information embedded in narrative form is significantly better remembered than the same information presented as isolated facts. Effective narratives typically follow a basic structure of setup, introducing the situation and characters, conflict, presenting a challenge, problem, or tension, and resolution, showing how the situation was resolved and what was learned. This structure creates natural engagement as audiences want to see how the story unfolds and what insights it reveals. While examples and narratives bring ideas to life, definitions ensure shared understanding of key terms and concepts. Technical terms or jargon often require explicit definition to avoid confusion or misinterpretation. By active listening, I mean not just hearing words, but demonstrating engagement through questions, paraphrasing, and appropriate responses. This definition ensures everyone understands exactly what the speaker means by this term. Abstract concepts also benefit from clear definition. Terms like leadership, innovation, or effective communication can mean different things to different people. Defining these concepts explicitly creates a common foundation for the discussion that follows. Definitions can take several forms. Dictionary definitions provide formal meanings from authoritative sources. Expert definitions draw on specialized knowledge from recognized authorities in a field. Operational definitions explain concepts in terms of observable behaviors or measurable criteria. Etymological definitions explore the origins and evolution of words to illuminate their core meanings. Analogies and comparisons bridge the gap between the known and the unknown by relating unfamiliar concepts to familiar ones. They help audiences understand new ideas by connecting them to existing knowledge. Figurative analogies, similes, and metaphors compare dissimilar things to generate insights. A well-structured speech is like a journey with clear signposts. It guides listeners from one point to the next without confusion. This comparison helps audiences understand the function of structure by relating it to the familiar experience of following a path. Literal analogies compare similar processes or concepts to explain one in terms of the other. The communication process is similar to sending and receiving a package. The sender must package the message clearly, choose an appropriate delivery method, and ensure it reaches the right address. The receiver must open it carefully and examine the contents as intended. This comparison helps explain communication by relating it to a similar but more concrete process. Effective analogies create aha moments of understanding, but they must be chosen carefully to ensure they're clear and not misleading. The comparison should illuminate rather than confuse, and the similarities should outweigh the differences in the aspects that matter for your point. Statistics provide numerical evidence that can quantify your points, showing magnitude, frequency, or trends. Numbers can add precision and credibility to claims that might otherwise seem vague or unsupported. Over 70% of hiring managers rank communication skills as their top priority when evaluating candidates. This statistic transforms a general claim about the importance of communication into a specific, quantifiable finding. However, raw numbers alone rarely communicate effectively. Making statistics understandable requires techniques like rounding complex figures, comparing numbers to familiar references, and contextualizing data to show its significance. The average person makes over 30,000 decisions daily. That's one decision every 2 seconds of your waking life. This contextualization helps audiences grasp the magnitude in a way that the raw number alone doesn't convey. The credibility of statistical support depends on using reliable sources and presenting data accurately. Misrepresented or cherry-picked statistics can undermine your credibility if discovered. Equally important is connecting statistics to your audience's lives to make them meaningful. Abstract numbers become powerful when audiences understand their implications for things they care about. Opinions and testimony leverage the expertise or experience of others to support your points. Expert testimony draws on the knowledge of recognized authorities in relevant fields. According to Dr. Maya Richards, a leading researcher in organizational psychology, the quality of communication within teams is the single best predictor of their performance. This testimony adds weight to claims about communication importance through the credibility of the expert source. Lay testimony shares the experiences or perspectives of ordinary people, including yourself, when appropriate. While not carrying the same authority as expert opinions, these perspectives can be powerful because they're relatable and authentic. They show how principles or ideas manifest in real life and can create strong emotional connection. The persuasive power of any testimony depends largely on the perceived credibility of the source. This credibility stems from factors like expertise, knowledge and experience relevant to the topic, trustworthiness, perceived honesty and ethical character, and currency, up-to-date knowledge in rapidly evolving fields. With this toolkit of supporting materials at your disposal, the next challenge becomes selecting and evaluating which types to use in specific situations. This selection process involves several key criteria. Relevance is perhaps the most fundamental consideration. Does the supporting material directly connect to and strengthen the point you're making? Even the most interesting example or compelling statistic becomes a distraction if it doesn't clearly support your specific claim or help advance your overall message. Credibility concerns the trustworthiness and reliability of your supporting material. Are your sources reputable? Is your data from reliable research? Are your examples accurate representations rather than outliers or exaggerations? Audiences will question your conclusions if they doubt the foundation upon which they're built. Recency matters particularly for topics that evolve quickly. Information that was accurate 5 years ago may be outdated now in fields like technology, medicine, or business practices. Using current information demonstrates that your understanding is up to date and relevant to present conditions. Interest is a practical consideration that affects engagement. Will this particular supporting material capture and maintain audience attention? The most relevant and credible support still fails if it's presented in a dry, technical, or overly complex manner that loses your audience's interest. Audience appropriateness returns us to the principles of Chapter 5, knowing your people. Is your supporting material suitable for your specific audience's knowledge level, values, and interests? Technical data might be perfect for specialists, but confusing for general audiences. Examples from one cultural context might not resonate with audiences from different backgrounds. Finally, variety in your supporting material creates a more engaging and comprehensive message. Using only one type of support, only statistics, only examples, or only expert opinions limits both the persuasive power and the interest level of your communication. Different types of support complement each other, addressing both logical and emotional dimensions of understanding and belief. Once you've selected appropriate supporting material, the next challenge is integrating it smoothly and ethically into your communication. This integration begins with clearly signaling when you're introducing evidence or examples. Transition phrases like, for instance, according to, research shows, or imagine, alert listeners that you're moving from claims to support, helping them mentally categorize what they're about to hear. These lead-in phrases serve as signposts that guide audience understanding. For instance, signals an example is coming. According to indicates you're about to share information from a source. Research shows prepares listeners for data or findings. Imagine cues a hypothetical scenario. These verbal markers create clarity about the nature and purpose of the supporting material you're presenting. Equally important is explaining the connection between your support and the point it's meant to reinforce. Never assume that audiences will automatically see why a particular example, statistic, or comparison matters to your argument. Make these connections explicit. This statistic matters because it demonstrates not just that communication affects success, but that it outweighs factors traditionally considered more important. This explanatory link transforms supporting material from mere information to meaningful evidence. It answers the implicit "so what" question that arises whenever new information is presented. Without this connection, even the most compelling support can seem like an interesting but ultimately irrelevant detour from your main message. Ethical integration also requires appropriate acknowledgement of sources when you're using others' ideas, research, or words. This acknowledgement serves multiple purposes. It gives credit where it's due. It enhances your credibility by showing research and preparation, and it allows audiences to evaluate the reliability of your sources. In formal written communication, this acknowledgement typically takes the form of citations and references. In spoken communication, verbal attribution is more appropriate. According to a recent article in Harvard Business Review, as communication expert Brené Brown explains, or research from MIT's Media Lab demonstrates, these attributions can be brief while still providing essential context about the source of your information. This ethical acknowledgement is not merely a formality, but a fundamental aspect of intellectual honesty. Presenting others' ideas as your own constitutes plagiarism, a serious breach of communication ethics that can severely damage your credibility if discovered. Even when your audience might not know the original source, maintaining integrity in your use of supporting material is essential to your development as an ethical communicator. Now let's put these principles into practice with exercises designed to develop your skills in identifying, selecting, and integrating effective supporting material. Our first exercise focuses on brainstorming different types of support for a simple claim. Choose a straightforward assertion like, effective communication improves workplace productivity, or Learning a second language provides cognitive benefits. For this claim, brainstorm at least 3 different types of supporting material you could use, perhaps a statistic, an example, and an analogy. For each type of support, consider what would be most convincing or clarifying for your purpose. A statistic might quantify the magnitude of the benefit. An example might illustrate how the principle works in practice. An analogy might help audiences understand the underlying mechanism or process. The goal is to develop flexibility in generating different forms of support that serve different functions in strengthening your message. Our second exercise practices the smooth integration of supporting material into your explanations. Choose one main point and one piece of supporting material from your brainstorming in Exercise 1. Write a short paragraph that states the point, introduces the support, presents it clearly, and then explicitly explains how it connects back to and strengthens your main point. Focus particularly on creating clear lead-ins that signal the type of support you're providing and explanatory links that make its relevance explicit. The transition into the supporting material should feel natural rather than abrupt, and the connection back to your main point should be unmistakable. This exercise develops the verbal bridges that transform isolated pieces of information into coherent, persuasive arguments. Our final exercise helps identify areas in your own communication that could benefit from stronger support. Review a piece of your writing or a plan for a presentation you've created. Look specifically for claims or points that are stated without sufficient supporting material. Where might audiences question your assertions or struggle to understand abstract concepts? Where could concrete examples, relevant statistics, or clarifying definitions strengthen your message? Put yourself in your audience's shoes. Where might they have questions or need more convincing? What might seem obvious to you but require explanation for them? What abstract terms or complex ideas might benefit from illustration? This audience-centered review helps identify gaps in your support that might not be apparent from your own perspective. As you practice these exercises, remember that supporting your ideas effectively is not about overwhelming audiences with information. It's about providing the right support, in the right amount, in the right way, to make your message clear, credible, and compelling. Sometimes, a single well-chosen example will be more effective than multiple statistics. In other cases, a combination of different support types will create the strongest foundation for your message. The goal is communication that feels substantive rather than superficial, grounded rather than arbitrary, and vivid rather than vague. When you support your ideas effectively, you don't just make statements, you build cases. You don't just share opinions, you provide insights. You don't just transmit information, you create understanding. This transformation, from mere assertion to supported argument, is what gives your words true power. It's what enables you to not just be heard, but to be believed, not just to inform, but to influence, not just to speak, but to persuade. In a world saturated with unsupported claims and unsubstantiated opinions, the ability to effectively support your ideas sets you apart as a communicator of substance and credibility. The principles and techniques we've explored in this chapter provide the foundation for communication that carries weight and creates impact. By moving beyond mere claims to well-supported arguments, you demonstrate respect for your audience's intelligence and critical thinking. You show that you value evidence and reasoning over assertion alone. And you create messages that not only reach minds, but change them. In our next chapter, we'll explore a dimension of communication that often separates the merely competent from the truly exceptional. While most communicators focus on what to include in their messages, masters of articulation understand that what you leave out can be equally crucial. This counterintuitive principle, this hidden factor that seems to contradict our natural instincts, can transform verbose, rambling communication into laser-focused impact. The difference between being tuned out and being truly heard often hinges on this single element that we'll uncover together. Chapter 7. Communicate Concisely. 2 executives stood before the board to present their strategic visions. The first spoke for 45 minutes, covering every aspect of his plan in exhaustive detail. His presentation was comprehensive, thorough, and meticulous. When he finished, the room fell silent. One board member checked her watch. Another stifled a yawn. The CEO asked, "Could you summarize your main point?" The second executive approached the podium. "Our company faces 3 critical challenges," she began: declining market share, rising production costs, and increasing competition from digital platforms. I propose we address these through targeted investment in automation, strategic partnerships with tech innovators, and a shift to subscription-based revenue models. My team has analyzed each approach and projects a 15% increase in profitability within 18 months. I welcome your questions about any aspect of this strategy. She had spoken for less than 2 minutes. The room immediately engaged, asking pointed questions and diving into meaningful discussion. Her clarity created instant impact. Her brevity sparked immediate engagement. Her conciseness conveyed confidence and command. What separated these 2 presentations wasn't knowledge, expertise, or even content. Both executives understood their subject matter thoroughly. Both had valuable insights to share. The crucial difference lay in their approach to communication, specifically in their relationship with a quality that has become increasingly rare and increasingly valuable in our information-saturated world. This quality, this approach to communication that can transform rambling explanations into razor-sharp insights, is what we'll explore in this chapter. It's a dimension of articulate speech that goes beyond clear pronunciation, vocal variety, logical structure, audience adaptation, or even well-supported arguments. It addresses not what you say or how you say it, but how much you say, and more importantly, how much you choose not to say. But what exactly does it mean to communicate concisely? And why has this particular skill become so crucial in today's communication landscape? At its core, concise communication means expressing ideas in the fewest words necessary for clarity and impact. It's about delivering your message without unnecessary elaboration, tangents, or verbal padding. It's the art of saying exactly what needs to be said, no more and no less. This doesn't mean speaking in clipped, abbreviated fragments or eliminating all context and nuance. Rather, it means being intentional about every word you use, ensuring that each one serves a clear purpose in advancing your message. It means recognizing that words are valuable currency and spending them wisely. In today's world of information overload, this approach to communication has become not just desirable, but essential. We live in an era of unprecedented competition for attention. Every day, the average person is bombarded with thousands of messages across multiple channels: emails, social media, news, advertising, conversations, presentations, and more. This constant barrage has fundamentally changed how people process information. Attention spans haven't necessarily shortened, as is sometimes claimed, but attention has become more selective. People have developed sophisticated filters to quickly determine what deserves their limited mental bandwidth. Messages that appear wordy, rambling, or unfocused are the first to be filtered out. Those that deliver value clearly and efficiently are the ones that break through. In this environment, conciseness becomes a form of respect for your audience's time and attention. It acknowledges that these resources are precious and limited. When you communicate concisely, you signal that you value your listeners' time as much as your own. You demonstrate that you've done the work of distilling your thoughts rather than expecting your audience to do it for you. This respect creates immediate goodwill. Before your audience even processes your content, they register that you're not wasting their time, a realization that makes them more receptive to your message. Conversely, when you ramble or include unnecessary details, you create an implicit disrespect that can undermine even the most valuable content. Beyond showing respect, conciseness helps your message cut through the noise of information overload. When everyone else is verbose, brevity stands out. A clear, focused message has a much better chance of being noticed, understood, and remembered than one buried in excessive words. In a world where attention is the scarcest resource, conciseness gives your ideas their best chance of making an impact. This impact is further enhanced by the clarity that conciseness creates. Unnecessary words don't just waste time, they actively obscure your main message. They're like fog surrounding your key points, making them harder to discern. When you eliminate this verbal fog, your main ideas stand out in sharp relief, immediately visible and accessible to your audience. Think of it this way. If you had to walk through a crowded room to reach someone important, would you prefer a direct path or one cluttered with obstacles? Unnecessary words are obstacles that your audience must navigate to reach your meaning. Remove these obstacles, and you create a clear path to understanding. This clarity directly enhances memory as well. Research consistently shows that concise, focused messages are easier to remember than verbose ones. The human mind can only hold so much information in working memory at once. When you present key ideas clearly and directly, without surrounding them with unnecessary details, you make them much more likely to be retained. Conciseness also projects confidence and focus. When you speak or write with precision, you demonstrate mastery of your subject matter. You show that you've thought deeply enough about your topic to distill it to its essence. This perceived command inspires trust in your expertise and judgment. Consider how we instinctively react to someone who uses 10 words when 3 would suffice, or who repeats the same point multiple times in slightly different ways. We often perceive such communication as uncertain, disorganized, or lacking in conviction. Conversely, clear, direct communication suggests clarity of thought and purpose, qualities we naturally associate with leadership and authority. It's important to note, however, that conciseness is not the same as curtness. Being concise doesn't mean being abrupt, rude, or incomplete in your communication. It doesn't require sacrificing necessary context, eliminating politeness, or cutting out all warmth and personality. The goal is efficiency, not coldness. True conciseness maintains all the elements necessary for effective communication, including appropriate context, relationship-building language, and sufficient detail for understanding. It simply eliminates everything that doesn't serve a clear purpose. It's about being economical with words, not miserly with information or connection. Achieving this balance requires planning from the outset rather than trying to condense rambling thoughts after the fact. This planning begins with defining your core message, the single most important thing your audience needs to know or do as a result of your communication. Every effective message has a core, a central idea or purpose around which everything else revolves. Identifying this core is the first and most crucial step toward conciseness. Ask yourself, if my audience could remember only one thing from this communication, what should it be? Your answer becomes the focal point that guides all other decisions about content and structure. This core message should be expressible in a single, clear sentence. If you can't distill your main point to this level of clarity, you may not have fully crystallized your own thinking yet. The exercise of formulating a focused purpose statement forces you to gain clarity yourself before attempting to create it for others. Once defined, this core message becomes a powerful filter for content selection. For every piece of information you consider including, ask, does this directly support or advance my core message? If not, it's a candidate for elimination, regardless of how interesting or important it might be in another context. This filtering process requires a fundamental shift in perspective, from what you want to say to what your audience needs to hear. We naturally approach communication from our own viewpoint, thinking about all the things we know or find interesting about a topic. Conciseness requires flipping this perspective to focus relentlessly on audience needs. Instead of asking, what do I want to include? Ask, what does my audience need to understand my point? This audience-centered approach naturally eliminates much of the excess that makes communication wordy and unfocused. It prioritizes essential information over interesting but irrelevant details, creating a message that serves your listeners rather than indulging your own interests. Part of this audience focus involves anticipating questions and addressing them directly. Rather than trying to cover every possible aspect of a topic, which leads to verbosity, Identify the specific questions your audience is likely to have about your core message and address those explicitly. This targeted approach ensures you include necessary information while avoiding unnecessary tangents. Structure also plays a crucial role in concise communication. A clear, logical structure, as discussed in Chapter 4, naturally prevents rambling by providing a defined path for your ideas to follow. When you know exactly where you're going and how you'll get there, you're much less likely to wander into unnecessary detours. This structure should get to the point quickly, especially in the introduction. While it's tempting to build up to your main idea gradually, this approach risks losing your audience before you reach your point. In most contexts, stating your core message early creates immediate relevance and helps listeners organize the information that follows. Each point within your structure should directly support your core message. If you can't clearly articulate how a particular point advances your central purpose, it may be extraneous regardless of how interesting or important it seems in isolation. This discipline of connecting every element to your core creates natural conciseness by eliminating anything that doesn't directly serve your purpose. With your message planned for conciseness, the next step is pruning your language, eliminating the verbal clutter that adds words without adding meaning. This process begins with identifying and removing redundant words and phrases that say the same thing twice. Our language is full of common redundancies that we use without thinking. Basic fundamentals, advanced planning, sum total, past history, future plans completely eliminate unexpected surprise. In each case, one word contains the meaning of both. Fundamentals are basic by definition. Planning is always done in advance. History is always past. Eliminating these redundancies tightens your language without losing any meaning. Beyond obvious redundancies, watch for repetition of ideas in different words. Saying the same thing multiple times in slightly different ways doesn't reinforce your point. It dilutes it. Say things once, clearly, and trust that your audience understood you the first time. Another source of verbal clutter is weak qualifiers and hedging language, words and phrases that dilute the impact of your statements. Expressions like sort of, kind of, basically, I think, perhaps, in my opinion, and it seems like make your communication sound uncertain and tentative. While appropriate when genuine uncertainty exists, these qualifiers often creep in as verbal habits rather than intentional expressions of doubt. Speaking with conviction doesn't mean making unfounded claims or eliminating all nuance. It means expressing your ideas directly and confidently when you have the basis to do so. If you've done your research and formed a well-supported conclusion, state it clearly rather than hedging unnecessarily. Your audience will respect your directness and perceive you as more credible and authoritative. Word choice also significantly impacts conciseness. Many communicators habitually use long, complex words when shorter, simpler ones would be clearer and more direct. Compare utilize to use, demonstrate to show, terminate to end, endeavor to try, or commence to begin. In each case, the shorter word is not only more concise, but also more accessible and often more powerful. This preference for simplicity isn't about dumbing down your message. It's about clarity and impact. Even highly educated audiences appreciate clear, straightforward language. Complex vocabulary rarely impresses. More often, it creates distance and obscures meaning. As Einstein reportedly said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Similarly, technical jargon and specialized terminology should be used judiciously, even with knowledgeable audiences. While some technical terms may be necessary for precision, excessive jargon often serves more to signal group membership than to communicate clearly. Ask whether each specialized term genuinely adds precision or merely adds complexity. Another target for pruning is wordy phrases that can be replaced with single words. Expressions like due to the fact that, because, in the event that, if, in order to, for the purpose of, for, at this point in time, now, and in the near future, soon, add words without adding meaning. Replacing these phrases with their one-word equivalents creates immediate conciseness without sacrificing clarity. Similarly, Using strong verbs instead of noun forms with helping verbs tightens your language considerably. Compare make a decision to decide, perform an analysis to analyze, conduct an investigation to investigate, or provide assistance to help. The verb forms are not only shorter, but also more dynamic and engaging. The choice between active and passive voice also affects conciseness. In active voice, the subject performs the action. She wrote the report. In passive voice, the subject receives the action. The report was written by her. Active voice is typically more direct and concise, using fewer words to convey the same information. It also creates more clarity about who is doing what, which is often crucial for understanding. While passive voice has legitimate uses, particularly when the actor is unknown, irrelevant, or better placed at the end of the sentence for emphasis, it's often overused in professional and academic communication. This overuse creates wordiness and can obscure responsibility or agency. Favoring active voice in most situations creates naturally more concise and clear communication. Even with careful planning and attention to language, most first drafts contain unnecessary words and phrases. Editing for conciseness is therefore a crucial final step in the process. This editing begins with reading your message aloud, which reveals wordiness and awkward phrasing that might not be apparent when reading silently. When we read silently, our minds can skip over excess words or mentally streamline complex sentences. Reading aloud forces us to process every word, making redundancies and unnecessarily complex constructions immediately obvious. If you find yourself running out of breath before reaching the end of a sentence, or if certain phrases feel awkward to say, those are clear indicators that editing is needed. A particularly effective editing technique is the cut it in half challenge. Take a paragraph or section of your message and challenge yourself to convey the same meaning in half the words. This constraint forces you to identify what's truly essential and eliminate everything else. While you might not ultimately cut exactly half, this exercise almost always reveals significant opportunities for tightening your language. This challenge works because it forces prioritization. When you must eliminate half your words, you naturally focus on preserving the most important elements of your message. This process often reveals that much of what you initially included was actually unnecessary for understanding your core point. Feedback from others provides another valuable perspective on your message's clarity and conciseness. We're often too close to our own words to see opportunities for streamlining. Ask trusted colleagues or friends if your message is clear and to the point. Have them identify any parts where they got lost, confused, or found their attention wandering. This feedback can be particularly valuable for identifying places where you've assumed knowledge your audience might not have, or included details that interest you but don't advance your main point. External perspective helps ensure that your conciseness doesn't come at the expense of necessary context or explanation. Now let's put these principles into practice with exercises designed to develop your skills in concise communication. Our first exercise is the Word Audit Challenge. Take a recent email, report section, or transcript of yourself speaking. Go through it sentence by sentence and highlight every word or phrase that could be removed without losing meaning. Be ruthless in this audit. Challenge every word to justify its existence. Look particularly for the common sources of wordiness we've discussed: redundancies, weak qualifiers, unnecessarily complex words, wordy phrases, and passive constructions. Also watch for entire sentences that, while perhaps interesting or well-written, don't directly advance the main point of the communication. After highlighting all potential cuts, remove them and read the streamlined version. Does it maintain the essential meaning? Does it actually communicate more clearly without the excess? In most cases, you'll find that the edited version is not only shorter, but also more powerful and direct. Our second exercise focuses on condensing individual sentences. Find or write several long, complex sentences from your professional or personal communication. Then rewrite each one to be shorter, more direct, and simpler without losing the core meaning. Focus particularly on replacing weak verb phrases with strong verbs. eliminating unnecessary prepositional phrases, and converting passive constructions to active ones. Look for opportunities to break very long sentences into two shorter ones if that creates greater clarity. For example, you might transform. A determination was made by the committee after lengthy deliberation that the implementation of the new policy would be conducted in a phased approach due to the fact that immediate full deployment was deemed to present excessive risk. After deliberating, the committee determined that implementing the new policy in phases would reduce risk. Our final exercise challenges you to craft an elevator pitch, a 30-second explanation of a complex idea. Choose a project you're working on, a book you've read, or a concept you understand well. Prepare a concise explanation that captures the core idea clearly and engagingly in about 75 to 100 words. This exercise forces extreme prioritization, identifying what's absolutely essential about your topic and eliminating everything else. It develops the valuable skill of distilling complex ideas to their essence without oversimplifying them. Practice timing yourself to ensure your explanation fits within the 30-second constraint. As you work through these exercises, remember that developing conciseness is a process. Most of us naturally tend toward verbosity, especially when discussing topics we know well or care about deeply. Conciseness requires conscious effort and practice to counter these natural tendencies. The goal isn't perfect brevity in every situation, but rather intentional choice about how many words you use and why. Sometimes a longer explanation is genuinely necessary for clarity or persuasion. The key is ensuring that every word serves a purpose rather than including excess out of habit or lack of editing. The benefits of mastering concise communication extend far beyond mere efficiency. In professional contexts, conciseness is increasingly associated with leadership and executive presence. Leaders are expected to cut through complexity and communicate with clarity and precision. Those who can distill complex situations to their essence and articulate clear directions are naturally perceived as more authoritative and decisive. Conciseness also creates greater impact for your most important messages. When you use words sparingly most of the time, the occasions when you do speak at greater length carry more weight. Your audience recognizes that if you're taking more time with a particular topic, it must be especially significant or complex. This contrast creates natural emphasis that would be lost if all your communication were equally verbose. Perhaps most importantly, conciseness creates space for dialogue and engagement. When you don't consume all the available time or attention with your own words, you leave room for questions, discussion, and genuine exchange of ideas. This space transforms communication from a one-way transmission to a collaborative exploration, often the most valuable form of interaction. The art of saying more with less, of making every word count, is a hallmark of truly articulate communication. It demonstrates respect for your audience, clarity in your thinking, and confidence in your message. In a world increasingly overwhelmed by words, the ability to communicate concisely isn't just a skill, it's a significant competitive advantage. In our next chapter, we'll explore a dimension of communication that transforms mere information into genuine connection. Beyond clarity, structure, and conciseness lies a quality that determines whether your words merely reach your audience or truly resonate with them. This elusive element, often overlooked in discussions of communication skill, can transform even the most routine message into a memorable experience. The difference between being processed and being embraced often hinges on this single factor that we'll uncover together. Chapter 8. Engage and Connect. What's the difference between a message that simply reaches your audience and one that truly moves them? Between words that are processed and promptly forgotten and those that linger in the mind for days or even years? Between communication that merely transmits information and communication that transforms understanding? The answer lies in a dimension of communication that transcends technique, structure, and even content itself. It's an element so powerful that it can elevate even ordinary messages to extraordinary impact. Yet it's also elusive. often overlooked in discussions of communication skills in favor of more tangible, teachable aspects. This mysterious factor, this catalyst that transforms mere words into meaningful experiences, is what we'll explore in this chapter. It's the difference between speaking to your audience and speaking with them, between being heard and being felt, between informing and inspiring. But what exactly is this element? What does it mean to truly engage and connect with those you're communicating with? And how can you develop this capacity in your own communication? The answers begin with understanding that effective communication is never merely about transferring information from one mind to another. It's about creating an experience that resonates with your audience on multiple levels. Intellectual, certainly, but also emotional, practical, and even aspirational. It's about moving beyond the transmission of facts to the creation of meaning. Think about the communications that have most impacted your own life, the speeches, conversations, books, or presentations that changed how you think, feel, or act. What made them so powerful? Chances are they didn't just inform you, they engaged you. They didn't just present ideas, they connected those ideas to something you care about. They made you feel something, think differently, or see the world in a new way. This is the essence of engagement, moving beyond passive reception to active participation in the communication process. When audiences are truly engaged, they're not just hearing your words, they're mentally interacting with your ideas. They're asking questions, making connections, visualizing concepts, and relating information to their own experiences. Their minds are fully present and actively involved in creating meaning from your message. Creating this level of engagement begins with capturing and holding attention. In today's distraction-rich environment, attention has become perhaps the scarcest resource. The human mind is bombarded with stimuli and information from countless sources, creating a natural filtering mechanism that screens out anything that doesn't immediately register as important or interesting. Breaking through this filter requires deliberate strategies that signal to your audience, "This matters to you, this is worth your valuable attention." But capturing attention is just the beginning. True engagement creates an intellectual and emotional connection that makes your message personally meaningful to your audience. This connection transforms communication from a one-way transmission to a shared experience, one that resonates with your listeners' values, experiences, needs, and aspirations. Why does this matter so much? Because engagement fundamentally changes how your message is received, processed, and remembered. When people are genuinely engaged with your communication, their understanding deepens. They process information more thoroughly, connect it to existing knowledge, and remember it more accurately and for longer periods. Research consistently shows that active engagement with material significantly enhances comprehension and retention compared to passive reception. Engagement also dramatically increases your persuasiveness and influence. People are far more likely to be convinced by messages they've actively processed and connected with than by those they've merely heard. When your audience is engaged, they're more likely to consider your perspective, accept your arguments, and act on your recommendations. Beyond these practical benefits, engagement builds rapport and stronger relationships. When people feel that you've created a genuine connection, that you understand and respect them, they develop greater trust in you as a communicator. This trust extends beyond the specific message to enhance your overall credibility and relationship with your audience. Perhaps most fundamentally, engagement makes the communication experience more enjoyable and satisfying for everyone involved. Engaged audiences feel stimulated, interested, and respected rather than bored, confused, or manipulated. And as a communicator, connecting with an engaged audience is infinitely more rewarding than speaking to a disengaged one. This mutual satisfaction creates positive cycles that enhance all future interactions. So how do you create this powerful engagement from the very beginning of your communication? The first moments are crucial. Research suggests that audiences form initial impressions within seconds, and these impressions strongly influence how they receive everything that follows. A strong opening doesn't just capture attention, it establishes the tone, creates expectations, and sets the stage for the connection you want to build. Powerful introductions, as we explored in Chapter 4, create immediate engagement by hooking your audience with something unexpected, intriguing, or directly relevant to their interests. Questions that stimulate curiosity, statistics that surprise, stories that draw listeners in, or quotes that provoke thought, all can serve as effective hooks that break through initial indifference and create immediate mental involvement. Beyond these standard techniques, creating intrigue through the unexpected can be particularly powerful. The human brain is naturally attracted to novelty and surprise. When you present something that violates expectations in a relevant way, you create an immediate cognitive engagement as the brain works to process and integrate this unexpected information. This might involve starting with a surprising statement that challenges conventional wisdom. Everything you've been told about public speaking is wrong. It could mean posing a puzzle or mystery that creates immediate curiosity. There's a single factor that determines success in negotiations more than all others combined, and it's not what most people think. Or it might involve an unexpected approach to a familiar topic that makes audiences see it in a new light. The key is that the unexpected element must be relevant to your message, not merely shocking or random. It should create a productive disruption that opens the mind to new possibilities rather than simply confusing or disorienting your audience. When used effectively, this technique creates an immediate engagement that naturally leads audiences to want to know more. Equally important is making your message immediately relevant by addressing the "what's in it for me" factor. People naturally pay attention to information that affects their lives, solves their problems, or advances their goals. By connecting your topic directly to your audience's needs or interests from the very beginning, you create an immediate personal stake in your message. This connection answers the implicit question in every audience member's mind: why should I listen to this? When you make the benefits or relevance explicit early on, you give your audience a compelling reason to invest their attention in what follows. This isn't manipulative, it's respectful, acknowledging that people's time and attention are valuable and showing them why your message deserves those resources. Once you've captured initial attention, the challenge becomes maintaining interest throughout your communication. This is where many otherwise well-crafted messages fail. They start strong, but gradually lose their audience as engagement wanes and minds begin to wander. Sustaining engagement requires a different set of strategies that continuously renew interest and deepen connection. Perhaps the most powerful of these strategies is storytelling. Humans are naturally wired for narrative. Our brains are structured to understand, remember, and connect through stories in ways that other forms of information simply can't match. From earliest childhood, stories are how we make sense of the world, remember important lessons, and connect with others. This deep neurological affinity for narrative makes storytelling an unparalleled tool for creating and maintaining engagement. When you tell a story, whether a brief anecdote or an extended narrative, you activate parts of your listener's brain that would remain dormant during purely factual communication. Research using fMRI scans shows that when we hear straightforward facts, only the language processing parts of our brain are activated. But when we hear a story, the sensory cortex, motor cortex, and other areas light up as if we were experiencing the events ourselves. This neural mirroring creates a much richer, more immersive experience that naturally maintains attention and enhances memory. Effective stories typically follow a basic structure: setup, introducing the situation and characters; conflict, presenting a challenge, problem, or tension; and resolution, showing how the situation was resolved and what was learned. This structure creates natural engagement as audiences want to see how the conflict is resolved. It also provides a framework for delivering your message in a way that feels natural rather than forced. The power of storytelling extends beyond engagement to significantly enhance retention. Studies consistently show that information embedded in narrative form is remembered far better than the same information presented as isolated facts. This story advantage in memory makes narrative one of your most powerful tools for creating messages that not only engage in the moment, but continue to influence long after they're delivered. Complementing storytelling is the use of vivid, specific language that creates word pictures in your audience's mind. Abstract, general language creates vague, forgettable impressions. Concrete, specific language creates clear mental images that engage the imagination and stick in memory. Compare, the presentation was effective, to the presentation captivated the room, drawing gasps when the surprising results appeared on screen and sparking a 30-minute discussion that continued into the hallway afterward. The second version doesn't just tell you the presentation was effective, it shows you what that effectiveness looked like in specific visual terms. It creates a mental image that's far more engaging and memorable than the abstract description. This vividness comes from moving beyond abstract terms to concrete details that engage the senses. What did something look, sound, feel, smell, or taste like? These sensory details create a richer, more immersive experience that naturally maintains attention and creates stronger memory traces. They transform your words from mere symbols on a page or sounds in the air to experiences in your audience's mind. Powerful, specific language also relies on strong verbs and precise nouns rather than vague, general terms propped up with adjectives and adverbs. Compare "she walked slowly" to "she trudged" or "she shuffled." The specific verbs create immediate, clear images that general terms with modifiers can't match. Similarly, "the politician gave a very bad speech" creates a weaker impression than "the politician stumbled through his speech," losing his place repeatedly and contradicting his own points. Figurative language, metaphors, similes, and analogies adds another dimension of vividness by creating connections between dissimilar things that illuminate meaning. Her argument was like a house of cards, impressive at first glance but collapsing under the slightest pressure. This comparison creates an immediate visual understanding that her argument was weak, simply doesn't achieve. These figures of speech engage the imagination and create memorable associations that help your message stick. Beyond language choice, incorporating variety in multiple dimensions of your communication helps maintain engagement by continuously refreshing attention. Varying your vocal delivery, as we explored in Chapter 3, prevents the monotony that leads to tuning out. Alternating between different types of supporting material, examples, statistics, stories, expert opinions, creates textural variety that keeps your message feeling fresh and interesting. Even varying sentence structure and length creates subtle but important engagement effects. A series of sentences with identical structure creates a monotonous rhythm that lulls the brain into disengagement. Mixing short, punchy sentences with longer, more complex ones creates a verbal rhythm that maintains interest. This is particularly true when you use short sentences to emphasize key points after longer explanatory passages. The contrast naturally creates emphasis and renews attention. Appropriate humor, used judiciously and with awareness of your audience, can also be a powerful engagement tool. Humor creates positive emotional states that enhance receptivity to your message. It builds rapport by creating shared positive experiences, and it provides mental breaks that actually enhance attention to the serious content that surrounds it. The key is ensuring that humor is appropriate to the context, aligned with your message, rather than distracting from it, and tailored to your specific audience's sensibilities. Questions represent another powerful engagement strategy, stimulating active thought rather than passive reception. Rhetorical questions prompt your audience to mentally formulate answers, creating immediate cognitive involvement with your topic. What would happen if every member of your team communicated with complete clarity? This question naturally prompts listeners to imagine and evaluate this scenario, engaging them more deeply than a simple statement about the importance of clear communication. In interactive settings, direct questions that invite verbal responses create even stronger engagement by transforming a presentation into a conversation. This participation makes audience members active contributors to the communication process rather than passive recipients. Even when only a few people actually respond verbally, The possibility of being called on keeps everyone more mentally engaged. Perhaps most fundamental to maintaining engagement is continuously relating your content to your audience's lives. Information in isolation, no matter how interesting or well presented, will never engage as deeply as information that's clearly connected to your audience's experiences, goals, or challenges. These connections create personal relevance that naturally commands attention and enhances both understanding and retention. This connection building isn't something you do once in your introduction and then abandon. It should be woven throughout your communication, with regular links back to audience concerns and interests. This matters to you because you might apply this when. This addresses the challenge many of you face when. These explicit connections help audiences see not just what you're saying, but why it matters to them specifically. Beyond these strategies for capturing and maintaining attention, creating genuine connection requires a more personal dimension of engagement. This deeper connection happens when you move beyond presenting information to sharing something of yourself, your authentic perspective, experiences, or passion for your topic. Showing your authentic self doesn't mean making your communication all about you or sharing inappropriately personal information. It means letting your genuine personality come through rather than adopting an artificial, professional, or presenter persona that creates distance. It means being human, showing enthusiasm when you're excited, concern when you're worried, conviction when you believe strongly in something. This authenticity might involve sharing appropriate personal experiences or perspectives that illuminate your message. It might mean speaking with passion and conviction rather than detached neutrality when the topic warrants it. It might simply involve using natural language and expressions rather than formal, stilted phrases that create artificial distance. This authenticity matters because humans naturally connect with other humans, not with polished performances or corporate personas. When you present a genuine self, you create the possibility for genuine connection. You become someone your audience can relate to and trust, rather than merely a source of information. Equally important in building connection is making your why clear, explaining not just what you're saying, but why it matters. This transparency about purpose and motivation helps audiences understand the values and goals behind your message, creating deeper resonance when those align with their own priorities. This clarity about purpose connects your message to shared values or goals that transcend the specific content. It moves communication from the realm of mere information to the realm of meaning and purpose. I'm sharing this approach to communication not just because it's effective, but because I believe that clearer understanding between people is the foundation for solving our most pressing problems. This kind of purpose statement creates a different level of engagement than merely presenting techniques without context. Demonstrating empathy and understanding further strengthens connection by showing that you genuinely see and appreciate your audience's perspective. Acknowledging their challenges, concerns, or viewpoints, even when different from your own, creates a sense of being seen and understood that naturally enhances receptivity to your message. This empathetic connection involves explicitly acknowledging the audience's perspective. I know many of you have tried communication techniques before that promised results but didn't deliver. It means showing you understand their specific challenges. The time pressure you face makes implementing new approaches difficult. And in interactive settings, it requires active listening, responding to what you hear rather than simply waiting for your turn to speak again. Inclusive language that welcomes everyone in your audience reinforces this connection by ensuring no one feels marginalized or excluded by your word choices. This means avoiding language that unnecessarily excludes or stereotypes certain groups, using terms that acknowledge diversity, and being mindful of phrases that might carry unintended negative connotations for some audience members. This inclusivity isn't about political correctness, but about effective communication. When people feel excluded or marginalized by language, they naturally disengage from the message. Inclusive language ensures that everyone in your audience can focus on your content rather than being distracted by terms that seem to exclude or diminish them. As your communication moves toward its conclusion, making your message memorable becomes the final engagement challenge. Research on memory consistently shows the primacy and recency effect. People tend to remember what comes first and last in a sequence better than what comes in the middle. This psychological principle makes your opening and closing particularly important for creating lasting impact. A strong conclusion, as we explored in Chapter 4, reinforces key points and creates a sense of completion while leaving a final memorable impression. It might restate your central message in powerful language, issue a challenge that extends your ideas into action, or provide a final thought or image that encapsulates your core point. Whatever approach you choose, it should create a clear sense of resolution while reinforcing what you most want audiences to remember. Throughout your communication, strategic repetition and reinforcement of key ideas enhances memorability. This doesn't mean simply saying the same thing multiple times in the same way, which quickly becomes tedious, but rather restating important points in different ways that create multiple pathways to the same core idea. Clear structure enhances understanding. When your ideas follow a logical path, your audience can follow your thinking more easily. Organized thoughts create organized comprehension. These variations reinforce the central concept while keeping it fresh and interesting. Summaries and signposts throughout longer communications serve a similar reinforcement function, helping audiences track and remember your main points. We've seen how structure creates clarity. Now let's explore how it enhances memory. These transitional summaries create multiple exposure points to your key ideas, significantly enhancing retention. Creating memorable sound bites, short, repeatable phrases that capture key ideas, provides mental handles that make your message easier to grasp and remember. Structure is the skeleton that gives your message shape and support. Conciseness isn't about saying less, it's about wasting less. These pithy formulations create memorable encapsulations of larger concepts that stick in memory and can be easily recalled and shared. These sound bites often employ rhetorical techniques like parallelism, similar grammatical structures, what you say matters, how you say it matters more, or contrast, juxtaposition of opposites. Simple language doesn't demonstrate simple thinking, it demonstrates clear thinking. These patterns create rhythm and emphasis that naturally enhance memorability. Finally, a clear call to action transforms passive understanding into potential change by explicitly stating what you want your audience to think, feel, or do as a result of your communication. This clarity about next steps prevents the common scenario where audiences appreciate your message but remain unclear about how to apply or respond to it. Starting today, review every important email before sending to eliminate unnecessary words. This specific direction creates a clear path from understanding to action. Making this next step clear and easy to take increases the likelihood of actual implementation. Breaking down larger changes into small, manageable first steps, providing resources or tools that facilitate action, and addressing potential barriers all help transform agreement into action. This practical dimension of engagement ensures that your message doesn't just create momentary interest, but leads to lasting impact. Now, let's put these principles into practice with exercises designed to develop your skills in creating engagement and connection. Our first exercise focuses on storytelling, perhaps the most powerful engagement tool available. Think of a simple personal experience related to a communication principle, perhaps a misunderstanding that could have been prevented through clearer structure, or a time when concise communication led to a better outcome. Practice telling this as a short, engaging story with a clear point. Focus on including key narrative elements: setting, where and when it happened, characters, who was involved, conflict, what problem or challenge arose, and resolution, how it was resolved and what was learned. Keep your story brief, 2 to 3 minutes when told aloud, while including enough specific detail to make it vivid and engaging. The goal isn't to create elaborate entertainment, but to develop the ability to package relevant experiences in narrative form that illuminates your points while creating engagement. Practice telling your story aloud, refining it until it flows naturally and clearly connects to the communication principle you want to illustrate. Our second exercise develops your skill with vivid, specific language. Take a few bland, abstract sentences like, "The presentation was effective," or "The new process is better." Rewrite each one using specific details and sensory language to make it more concrete and engaging. Ask yourself, what specifically happened that made the presentation effective? What did people do or say in response? What exactly is better about the new process? How would someone see, hear, or experience this improvement? Transform general evaluations into specific descriptions that create clear mental images. For example, "The presentation was effective" might become, "The presentation held everyone's attention for the full hour, sparked 15 questions, and led 3 department heads to request follow-up meetings to implement the ideas." This specific description creates a much clearer picture of what effective actually looked like in this context. Our final exercise builds your repertoire of attention-getting techniques. Choose a topic you might speak about in a professional or personal context. Brainstorm 3 to 5 different ways to start that communication to immediately capture attention, using various techniques like questions, statistics, stories, quotes, or surprising statements. For each opening, consider how it would engage your specific audience. What questions would stimulate their curiosity? What statistics would surprise them? What stories would resonate with their experiences? Tailor each attention getter to create immediate relevance and interest for your particular listeners. After generating these options, evaluate which would be most effective for your specific purpose and audience. Different openings create different tones and expectations. A surprising statistic creates a different engagement than a personal story or a provocative question. Choose the approach that best serves your overall communication goals while creating immediate engagement. As you practice these exercises, remember that engagement isn't about tricks or techniques applied mechanically. It's about creating genuine connection through communication that recognizes and respects your audience as active participants rather than passive recipients. The most sophisticated engagement strategies will fall flat if they're not delivered with authentic interest in your audience and genuine conviction about your message. The ultimate goal is communication that resonates on multiple levels, that engages the mind, touches emotions, connects to values, and inspires action. When you achieve this multidimensional engagement, your words don't just enter your audience's ears. They enter their thinking, their feeling, and potentially their doing. They don't just transmit information, they create understanding. They don't just reach your audience, they move them. This is the true power of articulate communication, not merely to be clear or correct or even persuasive, but to create meaningful connection between human beings. When you master the art of engagement, you transform communication from a technical skill into a powerful force for understanding, influence, and positive change. In our final chapter, we'll explore a dimension of communication that transforms occasional success into consistent mastery. Beyond all the principles and techniques we've discussed lies a factor that determines whether your communication skills develop or stagnate over time. This hidden element, often overlooked in the quest for quick improvement, separates those who become truly articulate from those who merely know how articulation works. The difference between knowledge and embodiment hinges on this single practice that we'll uncover together. Chapter 9. Practice to Power. Throughout this book, we've explored the essential elements of articulate communication, from the precise mechanics of speech to the strategic use of structure, from audience-centered adaptation to concise expression, from compelling support to genuine engagement. You now possess a comprehensive understanding of what makes communication clear, impactful, and effective. You know the principles, techniques, and approaches that distinguish ordinary speech from truly articulate expression. But here's a truth that many communication books avoid addressing. Knowledge alone will not transform you into an articulate communicator. You can understand every concept in this book perfectly. You can recognize articulate communication when you hear it. You can even analyze what makes certain speakers so effective. But none of this guarantees that you yourself will communicate articulately when it matters most. This gap between knowing and doing, between understanding and embodying, is what separates those who merely study communication from those who master it. It's the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical skill, between intellectual comprehension and instinctive competence. What bridges this gap? What transforms communication knowledge into communication power? What converts principles and techniques into natural, effortless expression that flows from you in even the most challenging situations? The answer is deceptively simple, yet profoundly challenging. It's an element so fundamental that it's often overlooked in our search for quick fixes and instant improvements. It's a component that can't be replaced by any amount of knowledge, talent, or natural ability. And it's the single factor that determines whether your communication skills develop or stagnate over time. This essential element, this bridge between knowledge and mastery, is deliberate, consistent practice. Practice may seem like an obvious answer, even a disappointing one. In a world that celebrates overnight success and instant transformation, the idea that mastery requires sustained effort over time can feel like unwelcome news. We're drawn to the promise of communication hacks or magical techniques that will instantly transform our abilities without the investment of time and effort. But this perspective misunderstands the very nature of articulate communication. At its core, articulation is not merely an intellectual skill, but a physical one, a complex coordination of muscles in the lips, tongue, jaw, vocal cords, and breathing apparatus. Like any physical skill, from playing a musical instrument to excelling in a sport, it requires not just understanding, but muscle memory developed through repetition and refinement. This physical dimension makes practice non-negotiable for improvement. You can read about swimming techniques all day, but until you get in the water and move your body through it repeatedly, you won't become a swimmer. Similarly, you can understand articulation principles perfectly, but until you engage in the physical act of speaking with conscious attention to these principles, you won't embody them. Practice builds the fluency that transforms conscious technique into unconscious competence. Initially, applying communication principles requires deliberate thought and effort. You must consciously monitor your articulation, structure your thoughts, adapt to your audience, and implement all the other elements we've discussed. This conscious application is mentally taxing and can actually interfere with the natural flow of communication. Through practice, however, these conscious techniques gradually become unconscious habits. The brain creates neural pathways that make articulate expression increasingly automatic. Eventually, you don't have to think about forming clear sounds or varying your vocal delivery or structuring your thoughts logically. You just do it naturally, freeing your conscious mind to focus on content and connection rather than technique. This progression from conscious effort to unconscious competence is what creates the confidence and control that characterize truly articulate communicators. When you know through experience that you can express yourself clearly and effectively, when you've done it successfully many times before, you approach communication situations with a calm assurance that itself enhances your effectiveness. Practice also helps overcome one of the most common fallacies in communication development, the "I know it, so I can say it" misconception. Many people assume that because they understand a concept clearly in their own minds, they can automatically explain it clearly to others. This assumption ignores the significant gap between internal understanding and external expression. The truth is that even experts in a subject often struggle to communicate their knowledge clearly to others. Clarity of thought doesn't automatically translate to clarity of expression. The ability to transform internal understanding into external communication that others can easily grasp is a distinct skill that requires its own development through, you guessed it, practice. But not all practice is created equal. Simple repetition, doing the same thing over and over without reflection or adjustment, has limited value for skill development. What creates true improvement is deliberate practice, focused effort directed at specific aspects of performance with the explicit goal of improvement. Deliberate practice involves identifying particular areas for improvement, setting clear goals for each practice session, receiving feedback on performance, and making conscious adjustments based on that feedback. It's not just about putting in time, but about putting in time intelligently, with purpose and direction. This approach requires pushing slightly beyond your comfort zone, working at the edge of your current abilities rather than staying safely within them. If you only practice what you already do well, improvement will be minimal. The most productive practice occurs in the zone where you're challenged but not overwhelmed, where you must stretch but can still succeed with effort. The consistency of this practice matters as much as its quality. Short, regular practice sessions yield far better results than occasional marathon efforts. The brain builds neural pathways more effectively through distributed practice, regular exposure and repetition over time, than through massed practice or cramming. This principle suggests that 15 minutes of focused practice 3 times a week will likely yield better results than a 3-hour session once a month. The regular reinforcement helps solidify learning and build lasting habits rather than temporary improvements that quickly fade. The most effective approach integrates practice into your daily communication habits rather than treating it as a separate activity. Every conversation, meeting, presentation, or phone call becomes an opportunity to apply and refine your skills. This integration transforms practice from an additional burden on your schedule to a natural part of your everyday interactions. With this understanding of why practice matters and how it should be approached, let's explore how to prepare effectively for important communications, the foundation upon which practice builds. Effective preparation begins with reviewing the fundamental principles we've explored throughout this book. Before planning any significant communication, mentally revisit the key elements of articulation, vocal delivery, structure, audience adaptation, supporting material, conciseness, and engagement. These principles form a comprehensive checklist that ensures you're addressing all dimensions of effective communication. With these principles in mind, planning your message becomes a systematic process rather than a haphazard collection of thoughts. Begin by defining your core purpose, what specifically you want your audience to know, believe, or do as a result of your communication. This purpose becomes the filter through which all other content decisions are made. Next, outline the logical structure that will best serve this purpose. Identify your main points, the key ideas that directly support your core message, and arrange them in the most effective sequence for your specific audience and purpose. This structure creates the skeleton that will support all the details, examples, and explanations you'll add. Then, select the appropriate content and supporting material based on your understanding of your audience. What examples will resonate with their experiences? What evidence will they find compelling? What level of detail do they need? This audience-centered selection ensures that your content not only supports your purpose, but connects with your listeners. For many communications, especially formal presentations or complex explanations, preparing notes or prompts can be helpful. These range from full scripts, writing out exactly what you'll say, to keyword outlines, noting just the main points and key supporting elements, to minimal prompts, a few trigger words to keep you on track. The best format depends on your experience level, the formality of the situation, and your personal preferences. Beginners often benefit from more detailed notes, while experienced communicators may need only minimal prompts. Whatever format you choose, remember that notes should serve as a safety net, not a crutch. They're there to support your natural communication, not to replace it. Crucially, if you do prepare notes, practice with them in the format you'll actually use. If you'll have note cards during your presentation, practice with note cards. If you'll have a one-page outline, practice with that. This consistency ensures that your practice accurately simulates the real conditions you'll face. With your message planned and any notes prepared, you're ready for perhaps the most crucial element of practice, Rehearsal. This is where your planned communication comes to life, where words on a page or ideas in your head become actual spoken communication. The single most important principle of effective rehearsal is this: you must practice aloud. Silent review, reading over your notes, or mentally rehearsing what you'll say is not sufficient preparation for spoken communication. The physical act of articulating words activates different neural pathways than silent reading or thinking. Only by speaking aloud can you develop the muscle memory and vocal patterns that will serve you in the actual communication situation. Speaking aloud also reveals aspects of your message that aren't apparent when reviewing silently. You'll discover awkward phrasing that looked fine on paper but feels unnatural when spoken. You'll identify transitions that need smoothing or explanations that need clarification. You'll get a realistic sense of timing and flow that silent review simply cannot provide. To maximize the benefits of rehearsal, try to simulate the real environment as closely as possible. If you'll be standing during your actual presentation, stand during practice. If you'll be using gestures or movement, incorporate these elements into your rehearsal. If you'll be using visual aids or props, practice with them to ensure smooth integration. When possible, rehearse in a space similar to where you'll actually be speaking. The acoustics, size, and setup of a room can significantly affect how you need to project your voice and pace your delivery. Familiarity with the physical environment reduces one more variable that might otherwise distract you during the actual communication. One of the most powerful tools for effective rehearsal is recording yourself. Creating an objective record that allows you to observe your own communication from an outside perspective. Video recording provides the most complete feedback, capturing not just your words, but your body language, facial expressions, and overall presence. Audio recording focuses your attention specifically on vocal elements like clarity, variety, and filler words. Many people resist recording themselves due to discomfort with seeing or hearing their own communication. This discomfort is natural, but worth overcoming for the invaluable insights recording provides. No other feedback mechanism gives you such direct, unfiltered information about how you actually come across to others rather than how you think you come across. When reviewing recordings, be constructively critical rather than harshly judgmental. Look for specific elements to improve rather than making global assessments of good or bad. Notice particular strengths you can build on, as well as areas for development. The goal is not perfection, but progress, identifying concrete ways to enhance your effectiveness. As you structure your rehearsal sessions, consider focusing on different elements in different run-throughs rather than trying to perfect everything simultaneously. One practice might focus specifically on clear articulation, another on vocal variety, another on smooth transitions between points. This targeted approach allows for more concentrated improvement in each area. Pay particular attention to your opening and closing, practicing these sections multiple times. These portions have disproportionate impact on your overall effectiveness and are also the most likely to be affected by nervousness during actual delivery. Extra practice creates greater confidence and fluency precisely where they matter most. Similarly, give extra attention to any particularly challenging sections or transitions in your communication. Identify the parts where you tend to stumble, lose your train of thought, or struggle to explain clearly. Targeted practice on these difficult segments creates confidence that carries through to the entire communication. A common question is how much rehearsal is enough. While this varies based on the importance of the communication and your experience level, the general principle is to practice until you feel comfortable and familiar with the material without becoming robotically memorized. The goal is conversational fluency, knowing your content well enough that you can express it naturally while still adapting to the specific situation and audience. This familiarity significantly boosts confidence, as research consistently shows that one of the primary sources of communication anxiety is uncertainty about content or delivery. When you know through practice that you can express your ideas clearly and effectively, much of the fear naturally dissipates. You can focus on connecting with your audience rather than worrying about what you'll say or how you'll say it. While self-directed practice is valuable, seeking feedback from others adds a crucial dimension to your development. No matter how objective you try to be, you have blind spots in your perception of your own communication. External feedback identifies these blind spots and provides the audience perspective that ultimately determines your effectiveness. Constructive criticism accelerates the learning process by highlighting specific areas for improvement that might take you much longer to identify on your own. It short-circuits the trial and error approach, directing your practice efforts more efficiently toward the elements that will create the greatest improvement. The source of this feedback matters significantly. Ideally, seek input from people who will be honest but supportive, those who want you to improve and will tell you the truth without unnecessary harshness. These might be trusted friends, colleagues, mentors, or communication professionals depending on your specific situation and needs. When possible, gather feedback from diverse perspectives rather than relying on a single source. Different listeners notice different aspects of your communication and respond to different elements based on their own backgrounds, preferences, and expertise. This variety of perspectives creates a more complete picture of your strengths and opportunities for growth. How you ask for feedback significantly affects what you receive. Vague requests like, "What did you think?" or "How did I do?" typically yield vague, often unhelpful responses. Instead, ask specific questions about particular aspects of your communication. Was my main point clear? Did I use too many filler words? Did the opening grab your attention? Were there parts where you felt confused or lost interest? Open-ended questions often elicit more useful information than yes-no questions. What was the most memorable part of my presentation reveals more than was my presentation memorable. Similarly, where did you feel confused or lose interest provides more actionable feedback than was anything confusing. Receiving feedback effectively is as important as seeking it. Listen openly without becoming defensive, even when the feedback challenges your own perceptions or highlights weaknesses you'd prefer not to acknowledge. Remember that the goal is improvement, not validation, and that even uncomfortable feedback can be incredibly valuable for growth. If feedback is unclear or seems unhelpful, ask clarifying questions to understand more specifically what the person observed and what they suggest. When you say the middle section dragged, which specific part felt slow to you? What specifically about my vocal delivery seemed monotonous? These follow-up questions transform vague impressions into concrete information you can act upon. Always thank people for their time and input, regardless of whether you agree with their assessment. Expressing appreciation encourages continued feedback and builds relationships with those willing to help you improve. It also acknowledges the value of their perspective, even if you ultimately decide not to implement all their suggestions. After receiving feedback, evaluate it objectively before deciding what to act on. Not all feedback is equally valid or relevant to your goals. Consider the source's expertise, the consistency of the feedback across multiple sources, and its alignment with your own communication priorities. Use feedback as valuable input to your development process rather than as directives you must follow uncritically. Beyond specific practice for particular communications, developing articulate expression requires a broader commitment to continuous improvement, making communication development a lifelong practice rather than a short-term project. This ongoing growth begins with mindful attention to your everyday communication habits. Pay attention to how you speak in routine conversations, meetings, and calls. Notice patterns in your articulation, word choice, organization, and engagement. Become aware of habitual phrases, filler words, or unclear expressions that have become automatic in your speech. This awareness is the first step toward conscious improvement. Consciously apply the principles we've explored throughout this book to these everyday interactions. Practice clear articulation when speaking with colleagues. Experiment with more concise expression in routine emails. Test different engagement techniques in team meetings. These daily communications provide countless opportunities to refine your skills in low-pressure situations. Treat every interaction as an opportunity to practice, rather than reserving your attention to communication for important occasions. This approach not only provides more consistent development, but also ensures that articulate expression becomes your natural mode of communication, rather than a special performance you put on for significant events. Complement this mindful practice with ongoing learning and observation. Listen critically to articulate speakers, analyzing specifically what makes them effective. What vocal patterns do they use? How do they structure their ideas? How do they engage their audience? This analysis provides models you can adapt to your own style and situation. Read about communication and related topics to expand your understanding and discover new approaches. Watch presentations by skilled communicators, focusing on different elements each time. Structure in one viewing, vocal delivery in another, engagement techniques in a third. This targeted observation develops your ability to recognize and implement effective communication strategies. Seek opportunities for public speaking or presentations that stretch your abilities in new directions. Volunteer for speaking roles in professional or community organizations. Offer to lead discussions or training sessions at work. These experiences provide valuable practice in varied contexts with different audiences and purposes. Throughout this ongoing development, embrace the journey rather than fixating solely on the destination. Recognize that mastery takes time and consistent effort. There are no shortcuts to becoming a truly articulate communicator. The most skilled communicators are those who have committed to continuous improvement over years, not those who have sought instant transformation. Celebrate small improvements along the way, rather than being discouraged by the gap between your current abilities and your ultimate goals. Notice when you express an idea more clearly than you would have 6 months ago. Acknowledge when you maintain better vocal variety than you used to. Recognize when you connect more effectively with your audience than in previous attempts. These incremental improvements compound over time into significant development. Maintain motivation by focusing on the power your words have to influence, connect, and create positive change. Articulate communication isn't merely a professional skill or personal accomplishment. It's a force that can transform understanding, resolve conflicts, inspire action, and build meaningful relationships. This broader purpose provides sustaining motivation when the process of improvement becomes challenging. Now, let's put these principles into practice with final application steps that will launch your ongoing development as an articulate communicator. First, establish a regular rehearsal routine. Scheduled time dedicated specifically to practicing communication skills. This might be 15 minutes 3 times a week, focused on articulation exercises, vocal variety practice, or rehearsal for upcoming communications. The specific schedule matters less than the consistency of your commitment. Treat these practice sessions as non-negotiable appointments with yourself, just as important as meetings with others. Block the time on your calendar, set reminders, and honor these commitments even when other demands arise. This disciplined approach signals to yourself and others that you value communication development as an essential priority, not an optional extra when time permits. Second, formalize your approach to feedback by making it a deliberate part of your improvement process. After your next significant communication, whether a formal presentation, an important meeting, or a difficult conversation, identify 1 or 2 trusted individuals and specifically ask them for feedback on 1 or 2 aspects of your communication. Prepare your specific questions beforehand rather than making impromptu requests. I'm working on being more concise. Did you notice any parts where I could have been more direct or eliminated unnecessary details? I'm focusing on clearer organization. Was my structure logical and easy to follow? These targeted questions yield more useful feedback than general inquiries about how you did. Finally, commit to continuous learning by identifying 1 specific action you'll take this month to develop your communication skills. This might be watching a presentation by a skilled speaker with focused attention to their techniques. It might be reading an article about a specific aspect of communication. It might be practicing tongue twisters daily to improve articulation or consciously eliminating filler words for a week. Make this commitment specific and achievable rather than vague or overwhelming. I will practice vocal variety for 10 minutes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is more likely to be implemented than I will improve my vocal delivery. Write down this commitment and place it where you'll see it regularly as a reminder of your development priority. As we conclude this exploration of articulate communication, I want to leave you with a perspective that transcends techniques and strategies, a vision of what your commitment to communication development can ultimately create in your life and the lives of those you touch. Words truly are power. They have the power to clarify or confuse, to connect or divide, to inspire or discourage, to heal or harm. The ability to use words with precision, purpose, and impact is not merely a professional advantage or social skill. It's a profound capacity to shape reality through the meaning you create and share. When you commit to developing this capacity, when you practice consistently, seek feedback courageously, and pursue continuous improvement mindfully, you're not just becoming a better speaker or writer. You're becoming someone who can transform understanding, resolve conflicts that seemed intractable, build bridges across differences, and inspire action toward shared goals. You're becoming someone who can articulate visions that others couldn't see, clarify concepts that others found confusing, and express emotions that others couldn't name. You're becoming someone who can comfort with just the right words, challenge with just the right questions, and connect with just the right stories. This journey from knowledge to embodiment, from understanding principles to living them naturally in every interaction, is the true transformation this book has invited you to undertake. It's not a journey with a final destination, but rather an ongoing evolution toward ever more articulate, impactful, and authentic expression. The practices and principles we've explored are not mere techniques to be applied mechanically, but seeds to be cultivated through consistent attention and care. As you nurture these seeds through deliberate practice, they grow into natural capacities that become inseparable from who you are as a communicator and as a person. This integration, this embodiment of articulate expression, is the ultimate power that practice creates. It's the difference between having communication skills and being an articulate communicator in every fiber of your being. It's the difference between occasionally speaking well and consistently expressing yourself with clarity, impact, and genuine connection. This power is available to anyone willing to commit to the journey, to practice consistently, seek feedback openly, and pursue improvement continuously. It doesn't require extraordinary talent or natural ability, just extraordinary dedication to the process of development over time. As you move forward from these pages into your own practice, remember that every word you speak carries the potential to create meaning, connection, and positive change. Every conversation, presentation, or written message is an opportunity not just to transmit information, but to transform understanding. Every interaction is a chance to use your words with purpose, precision, and power. The journey to articulate communication is ultimately a journey to more meaningful connection with others and more authentic expression of yourself. It's a journey worth taking not just for the professional advantages it creates or the personal confidence it builds, but for the positive difference your words can make in a world that desperately needs clear understanding, genuine connection, and inspired action. Your voice matters. Your words matter. And through deliberate, consistent practice, the power of those words to create positive impact will continue to grow throughout your lifetime. This is the true promise of articulate communication, not just to be heard, but to be understood, not just to speak, but to connect, not just to communicate, but to transform. But articulation alone isn't enough when you're put on the spot. Even the most articulate communicators can freeze when required to respond quickly in meetings, interviews, or unexpected conversations. What happens in those critical moments when you don't have time to prepare? There's a missing piece that separates those who can consistently express brilliant thoughts under pressure from those who know what to say only after the moment has passed. The solution to this challenge, the key to unlocking truly responsive, agile communication, awaits you in the audiobook Speak Like a Genius: How to Think Fast Before You Speak. Tap the center of the video now to continue your transformation journey.